Consciousness is a result of raising and lowering your frequency. So there's a whole understanding that you already have that exists within your fourth dimensional level of consciousness of what you're doing when you're in the dream state. You don't have to even remember it here. It helps your fourth dimensional self to get its information across to you. If you hear it out here in the 3D world, it makes a link to wake up the aparthy in your third strand and in your mental body that will allow that information to come down more quickly. But you have the information. The information from your dreams is with you right now. The information that we're going to explore today that gets into mega mechanics on a cosmic level and then takes it down into understanding mechanics on a personal level. This isn't my information. This isn't information that's just the guardians. Every one of you has portions of this information literally encoded in your templates. It is literally alive in little fragmented, not quite connected yet, chemical forms in your chemical DNA. It's living information that belongs to you. And the use of going to workshops and things where other people have some information that they've awakened in themselves to share, they've brought it into memory, is because they can transmit the frequency to you, and it helps to stimulate the activation of your aparthy, which helps to bring the information in from your own cellular memory. So we're involved in a process here, and the information that I'm going to share with you today that has to do with Stargate structure and it has to do with manifestation templates and source, if it sounds far out or out there to you, just realize there's a part of you out there with me. There's a part of each of us that's stationed. Our consciousness is stationed within a 15-dimensional system. And then there are 3 levels of primal creation sound fields beyond that. And then there is a full expansion into the unity of Source, where we are all one being. I am you and you are me, and we are all that is, when we know ourselves as Source. When we come into feeling the sensations involved with those statements, it changes the orientation of the emotional body, where separation from others isn't real. That doesn't mean you won't have conflicts with people sometimes. But when you have conflict, it will be approached with absolute love. In the same way, perhaps, that a mother would approach a child who's misbehaving. You still love the child, and that is not debatable. It is given, it is unconditional, and it is not dependent upon their behavior or their attitude. The love is simply given. However, the actions can be judged. The child's worth is not judged. The child's blessedness is not judged. But if actions are being taken that are destructive to the child or destructive to others, which is not good for the child either, then intervention is provided with love. There's tough love and there's soft love. When we go into understanding that we are all one, even with the bugs and the birds and the trees and the molecules of water and all of the things that are out there on this planet, and that goes for everything in our system, in our density level and its universes, and also within the 5 density levels, also within all the other time matrices in creation, because this is not the only one. We begin to have, it's an awakening. That's a word that's overused and quite abused in this day and age, but it is an awakening of a cognition that once it's awake, and you start to feel its flutters moving through your system, moving through your emotional body, moving through your mental body. They're physical sensations. It'll download eventually into strand 1, where it's felt in the body. When you get to that point, there's no turning back. You won't shut down the aparthy anymore, because the state that it brings you into is such a state of expanded feeling that even in the face of what other people would look at as terror, or in the face of what other people would judge as horrible circumstance or threatening circumstance, you can be in the world, actively and fully engaged in the world, but not of it, which means you're not controlled by it, which means you're becoming the master of your hologram. It's not your master. It means you can walk through situations that are joyful and fully experience the joy and let it move through you. And you can also walk through experiences that can be scary and not pleasant, and you can still hold the preference that, yeah, it would be nice if it wasn't this way right now, and know that you are actively working to heal it, so to help it the occasion or the event rise to a higher level. But you can get to the point, even the point of body control, where you can control pain, where you can control your reaction, you can choose your reaction. The hardest part of the reaction is to choose. A lot of people think it's the mental body, because when you first start to become a master of your hologram, mental body training is what usually comes first, where you learn that you need to choose your thoughts. And before you can choose them, you have to see what they're doing in there. So you need to become mindful, which means you take some time to be alone, privately, with no music on, no distraction. You simply close your eyes and say, all right, self, I'm just going to observe. You learn to observe what's happening in the space in your head first, without the sensory distraction. The best place to do it is in a comfortable temperature room that's dark, where you don't have light distracting you, you don't have temperature variation distracting you. And a lot of people, I've found, those sensory deprivation chambers that some forms of therapy use, I've known some people that can't deal with that type of environment at all because they are so frightened and they have so many fear patterns built up around themselves and what might be in there, because they have all sorts of thought patterns running around on the subconscious level that are controlling and directing their energy. And it can be very scary when you first go into a confrontation with those parts of yourself. Mild sensory deprivation, you don't have to go hire a chamber or a therapist that'll do it for you, but putting yourself in a quiet, comfortable room in an environment where you feel safe and simply going into quiet, into the stillness. And in the stillness is where all action takes place. You'll hit a place of stillness. At first you'll get bored. Then you will find one of the first things that happens, 20 different thoughts come rushing in at once. What am I going to have for dinner? When is it I'm going on that trip? When are the kids going to be home? You will find chatter. You will find mental chatter that goes on and on and on and on and on, even when you stop listening to it. You can hear it going, and you can say, what part of me is saying this stuff? Where is it coming from? And you realize it's either a part of you or somebody's talking to you from someplace else. One of the first things to do is when you identify the mental chatter, you're going to direct it on what to do. It is a chaos pattern of several parts of your own consciousness, usually, unless there's something messing with your fields or unless you're getting direct verbal communication from your higher parts. But usually, the first level of the voices you will hear are patterns of energy that are stuck in your three-dimensional body, having conversations with themselves and trying to get your attention on the three-dimensional level. They're like little thought children that are parts of you. You'll have your inner child in there that has all sorts of things that it didn't get the way it wanted when it was younger, and it feels all sorts of things. And it may be a sad little child that just wants to feel safe and it's scared of everything, or it may be a really angry little child that wants to just bite everybody that it sees. And if you've trained yourself to be a nice person on the outside, and you find an inner child that wants to bite the ankles of every person that walks in the door and has very what you would consider irrational thoughts, I hate that person, I wish that would blow up, I wish the world would be destroyed. You will find some of these sometimes in you. First of all, you have to realize you're not abnormal, you're not psychotic, you're not nuts. Psychosis comes from when those energy patterns build up a stronger energy imprint than the energy that's being processed through the conscious rational mind. And psychosis comes out in chemical form as well. It creates imbalances in the brain chemistry, which can even create shutdown of certain functions in the organ systems that can create deformities in the brain itself and other organ systems. What's interesting is in the hologram, thoughts will wear chemical clothes, which means thought forms that are energy forms are templates that accrete the intermediary phase particulates that then create a reaction in terms of what we perceive as matter densification. So all of those parts of you that you will start to find when you go into your own headspace actually have chemical bodies of their own. But if they're simply portions of your own identity from this lifetime, thought forms that you never assimilated, ideas or emotional reaction patterns that you had to different events in your life, they exist in your body as chemical form. They will be some type of chemical molecular structure in your body. In fact, the ones that are very disharmonic are the ones that cause chemical disease in the body. Disease is not the natural condition for the human body. Disease comes from templates, matter templates, scalar waveforms that are thought forms that are stuck and disharmonic with the natural frequency sequencing of the dimensional structure and the dimensional structure that the body is built on. They create blockages of energy, and they create distortions in the geometrical relationships between scalar waves in the manifestation template. Now, the manifestation template has a job. Its job is to take the consciousness it's composed of and manufacture it into a certain energy signature that from this state of awareness we can perceive as chemical reality, molecular atomic reality. Every thought you think has a chemical reality in your body. If somebody says, where are your thoughts? Well, there are a lot of places, but one of the places are they running through your blood right now? They're running through your organ systems. They're in your body doing things, in your physical body. So they're not... Science tends to look at thought as one of those unquantifiable things that's out there someplace, or it's a result of physical phenomena, but it is not a physical phenomena itself. Thought is just as physical as your physical body is. It has just as much of a matter component as your physical body does. And you can also reverse that statement. That would mean, if thoughts are things, things are thoughts. That would mean that your physical body, the planet's physical body, were thought forms. And if we think about thoughts, we think, okay, well, thoughts are, you can change them easy, you can move them around, you can make them go away, you can do all sorts of things with them because they're mutable. They respond to consciousness. So your consciousness can affect them and direct them places. But then we think a little differently usually. We're programmed by our culture to think about our physical bodies and the physical world in a very different way. Here we are, stuck in a physical world. It might be a nice physical world, we might be having a good experience, but there's a big difference between thoughts and things, between imagination and reality. If people get too far out in imagination, they're considered crazy, because the other people that are considering them crazy absolutely know that, well, this is physically real and that isn't. Oh, really? If it's all thought form reality, and all thought form reality has some type of chemical matter manifestation, there is no difference between the two substances. Which means that we're all crazy because we think we're in a solid world, or it means when we use imagination, or when we have perceptions or expansions of consciousness that take us into the realm that psychologists might want to say, put labels on, what we are actually doing is participating in a reality field that has a different chemical structure of matter, but it is just as real in its space-time location as we are. When we begin to experience things like dreams or visions, or if we have the ability to close our eyes and imagine going to another place, it can be a pretty place that you've gone on vacation, where you just project a part of your consciousness there, or it can be another planet because you want to check out the scenery. What most people don't realize is when we are creatively visualizing, we are creating thought forms that will fill out in chemical form within the frequency band. I'm sorry about this. I don't know why it's doing this. There's something it seems to do it when I walk, but I have a hard time holding still. Anyway, we can. If we start to realize that when we think a thought, or let's say, you know that your sister's not feeling good and she lives in California and you live in New Jersey. And you can't call her, but you really, really would like to say something to her, make sure she's okay. A part of you, with that thought, literally projects all the way across that distance in an instant. And it manifests as part of the environmental chemical field in the area where she is. And it temporarily interfaces with her biofields. You have created a manifestation, but it's within usually the fourth dimensional frequency bands, where it doesn't yet, when you get good at it, you may scare your sister to death because you actually popped up at her door out of nowhere and then disappeared again. There are people, not too many on the planet right now, there are a number who claim it, but I have only about 3 that I know of that can actually do it. They can consciously bilocate, which means they're aware enough and they have enough strand activation in their DNA, enough chemicals working in the DNA, that they can pull in frequency from the next density level, which means 3 dimensions up, dimension 4, 5, and 6. So they can create almost a double frequency effect in the physical body, which allows more chemicals to be produced in the thought form. And they can send the thought forms where they desire. And in sending them, they can literally manifest a hologram of themselves there that would look just as real and be just as physical. And if it happened to get hit by a car, it would get hurt. It's a physical being temporarily. And then it flashes off and the energy comes back to the person who sent it. There are people who can do this. This is a potentiality all humans have. It's not going to be one of our first to learn. But this is where we're going, because we're in a thought form field. Yes?
I've experienced in dream time people showing up in my room, and they're really there, and I'm opening my eyes, and I'm talking to them, and I'm trying to touch them, and I've reached out.
Right.
And so people do that in dream time as well?
Yep.
And are they conscious usually?
Usually they're very conscious of doing it in the dream state, but whether or not they remember they did it will depend upon if they have those frequencies open, not just in the 4th strand, but in the 3rd strand, to bring that information down in so they have memory of what they did. Most of us run around all the time talking to each other in the dream state. And then we forget, you know? But when we get that weird little feeling of deja vu, you seem familiar to me. You knew each other from somewhere. It might be reincarnational from other space-time vectors, or it might be dream time from other space-time vectors. In fact, it's kind of funny, but with these workshops are very unique. The work I'm in has had a life of its own ever since the beginning. And there has been a call put out on 6-dimensional frequencies, which means it comes through the 6th sub-frequency band and each of the lower dimensional frequencies. And there have been gatherings of people on the density 2 levels. We meet first there. And that's where the people who come to the workshops happen to, in their hologram, get some exposure to the fact that these workshops exist and get a feeling that it might be something that they want to explore. Because their consciousness in density 2 already went there. So you already have the information from when you went there and got the information from the higher levels. So all you need to do is have the frequency transmitted here that matches it, which will wake it up in your bodies. So it's like we all know each other already, and everything knows each other eventually when you get back into the source space. But even on the dream state level, we interact with each other all of the time. We resolve conflicts there. We choose agreements there. That's where parents and children choose each other. When we're born, it is always by choice. The parents choose to be parents, and the person incarnating has the choice as to what set of available parents they will come to. Because the person who is going to be the incarnating soul has a certain itinerary, its reason for incarnating, and it will need certain qualities in the DNA template in order to fulfill whatever the particular choice of mission is. So the parents will be chosen by the child. That means when you were children, before you came into your bodies, you chose your parents. Some of us have had horrendous parents. You think, why in God's name did I ever choose that? What am I, a masochist? You know? There are a lot of reasons why we sometimes choose people as our biological parents, or even our surrogate parents, if our biological ones aren't available, that treat us in ways that we really wish they didn't, that have left us things to heal and clear, that have taken many, many years and we're probably still doing and probably will be doing for the next couple of lifetimes. There are lessons to be learned in situations like this. Many times it's a karmic resolution where you had other relationships to each other in different time vectors that are going on now. So in this time vector, you came to fix a part of that if it was going bad. But it's not always karmic. Sometimes it's as simple as DNA. It's as simple as, particularly with indigo children, some of the indigo children have the worst experiences in their parent experiences because they have to have very specific codes in the DNA to be able to come in with the 6th strand activated at birth, which is to allow them in adulthood to be able to open up their body templates and run the highest frequencies in this time matrix down into the planetary grids so they can be part of the team that's going to run the stargates. So when it comes to, well, there's 5 sets of parents available that when you combine them have the right frequencies to give me the template I need, and out of the 5, I can only stand one of those 10 people. I mean, it's not that you don't love them, because from those spaces you don't judge people and get into isms quite as much with them. But there's still preferences where people that you have a lot of incarnational experiences with in other vectors, you might feel a warm fuzziness for, and oh yeah, I want you to be my mom. But if that combination does not suit best what your purpose is for incarnating, you may choose the one who, you may be a loving person at this point, but they haven't evolved past the point where they're still learning their lessons. So you actually come in, you get from them the gift of a DNA template that you needed, and you give to them a gift of certain experiences that will, in their own way, and often through your suffering, that you will learn to heal and transmute later because you have the capacity to do it. You have given back a gift of taking part of their chaotic energies from their DNA and taking it into your own consciousness where it becomes your job to transmute it. There's the old saying of the sins of the father being passed on to the children, the sins of the parents. We get part of our DNA code, our chemical DNA, from the mother and part from the father. That means if we have those chemicals there, we've received an imprint of their templates, their manifestation templates, their DNA templates, which means part of their scalar wave patterns became ours, became linked with our consciousness. That becomes the first imprint of our three-dimensional personality and our identity, that our first part of growth is learning to clear and harmonize the energy patterns we picked up through fetal integration. And when we do that, and as we do that, we're able to bring in our higher levels of consciousness and activate the higher strands. So there's a whole process of manifestation that when we talk about manifestation templates, when we talk about part of chi, part of K, and part of cum units, you have these scientific things over here. You have the stuff that we call reality here that everybody deals with and everybody's been through, like, birth and growing and parents that aren't perfect. And then you have the divine spirit over here. They're not separate things. They're all aspects of the same phenomena we call existing, we call being alive. So it's worth understanding some of the physics components. You don't have to be able to, there's some names of particles that I haven't even looked up yet that they were naming, and I'm wondering if some of them are even there. If you even understand basically that, okay, these particles do exist and they've been identified, you don't have to memorize what every one of the particles were, unless you're going to work with it directly for some reason. But just realizing, to give the mental body the understanding that, oh, this is how the pieces fit together. We're starting to assemble the jigsaw puzzle that is our perceptions. Our consciousness is in dimensionalization, which means it's stationed right now in 15 different levels with 15 different angular rotation of particle spins to deal with, and then there's a whole portion of it that's stationed outside of the time matrix in what's called the sound fields. I'll talk about the sound fields in a minute, because when we get into understanding the creation process, the diagrams that are up here, I'll get into it in a minute a little bit. A lot of you have already seen them. These have to do with the structure that part of chi units, part of K, part of chi, and part of cum, as they do their thing that I'll explain in a minute, they create forms, geometrical relationships that form a template. This is a visual representation of understanding some of the relationships of that template. You're not going to see that image hanging in the sky out in space or anything. But what that image is showing you relationships of certain parts of energy to certain other parts of energy. When we do manifestation templates ourselves, when we think a thought, we just created one. We created a manifestation template, whether we meant to or not. Our conscious mind here is not the only part of us that constantly generates thought forms. And the thought forms will fill out someplace in chemicals. The emotional body is a part of our consciousness that is associated with the second strand of DNA. It's the D2 part of our consciousness, the part of ourselves that are stationed. The consciousness is focused in the second dimensional frequency bands. That part of us thinks too. It feels, it thinks, and it has reaction to what it perceives. The part of ourself that's our emotional body right now is partly associated with the subconscious mind. because there's been something done to our DNA that's blocked the natural ability of the emotional body part of ourselves to communicate directly with the mental body part of ourselves, like they speak different languages. So sometimes the closest we can get to communication with that part of ourselves is we will have a feeling. We will have a sense of something. In fact, what we call the tactile sense, touch, being able to reach out and feel something, being able to feel temperature on you or wind blowing on you, being able to feel is an attribute of the D2 emotional body. It's known as the telluric body, the elemental body. It's the part of us that's formed of complex atomic structures, more complex atomic structures, not just subparticles, but it's made of atoms that form molecules that form chemical elemental substances. The waters in our body is mostly made of water. That's an element, but it's conscious. It's a part of our consciousness. We literally have a part of our consciousness right now manifesting, reincarnating, incarnating with us as water molecules. There's a part that's every component of atomic structure, subatomic structure, and chemical reality and organ structure within the body that science tells us is there, part of our outside bodies, is actually a manifestation of part of our consciousness. That means that your brain is conscious. It means that your big toe is as conscious as your brain is. It means that your liver is conscious. It means that your subatomic particles are conscious. And they're not a consciousness that's different from you. They're a form of manifestation that a part of your consciousness is taking on in order to build and manufacture your hologram so this part of your consciousness can see objectification. There are parts of us that right now operate subconsciously, which means below the focus of the conscious attention here. But they are not subconscious, below conscious, not conscious. They are not unconscious. They're just as conscious as we are in the ways natural for the scalar waveforms that they're manifesting through in that particular part of the organism. As we do integration and we begin to activate our templates in our DNA, we begin the process of clearing what's blocking our understanding the language of the rest of ourselves. We start to integrate our body consciousness, and that's the only way we're going to be able to get enough rapport with our body consciousness where when we ask it to do something as far as particle spin, it might actually listen. One of the things that's really helpful, there's a lot of techniques that we use to use Merkaba mechanics, which we'll talk about probably later this afternoon, to get the atomic structure to do certain things. But the first thing, before you even use mechanics like that, is to simply remember it's a part of your consciousness. It's alive, sentient, and aware like you are. Ask first. Just ask it first. And then help it by setting what the mental body knows it can do, is setting a mathematical grid that will assist it to do so. It's not our job to dominate our emotional bodies or our physical bodies. It's our job to integrate them and realize that they're a part of our consciousness. And if you happen to be, like say, pretend you were actually the atoms that form the big toe of a person. Now, you know yourself as sentient, and you have your reality field, and you have your free will that you sense as a part of your right of being. You wouldn't like it if somebody, just because it was part of you, forced its will on you. That's taken away your free will, particularly if you didn't like what it felt like, particularly if what it wanted you to do actually caused pain or disharmony for you. So if you were an atom in a big toe of a whole person's body, you would appreciate it if that level of the consciousness that's above your frequency asked you if it was okay and asked if you would help, if you would be willing to co-create a certain condition. That's what our higher selves are doing that are in the higher dimensional fields. It's kind of like we're the big toe in a bigger body. And what's really strange is there's more reality to that in the hologram than we might imagine. All right, when we talk about big toes, atoms and big toes and relationships of consciousness levels to each other, we're kind of like part of the structure that forms a body. The self we know as this is me, my consciousness, the part of you that's stationed seemingly in your head, which is actually stationed throughout your body, but it feels like it's focused in your head. That part of you is actually a part of the atomic structure of who you will be as you integrate your higher parts. You have another body right now. We all do. The planet does. in density 2. You have another one in density 3 and another one in density 4. They exist with you at the same time, just like the atoms in your toe exist with you below the frequency or the station of your awareness. These higher bodies exist with you right now, and they have a physical form and a chemical translation. In the New Age movement, there's a lot of talk about the subtle energy bodies and about the auric field levels and those kind of things. Now, they are indications that those other bodies exist. And from here, the circular energy fields surrounding the body are the form that those higher levels of consciousness take when perceived from here. But actually, just like you have a seemingly physical body here, when you integrate fully 6 dimensions of consciousness, your body molecules here change, they expand, you change angular rotation of particle spin, and the speed of electrons as they move around the protons in your cells changes also. You accelerate in frequency, and your matter particles become less dense, and there's more space that appears between atoms. The body expands. You have a bigger body that's less dense. It's a semi-etheric body. Now, when we first were given the information on dimensional structure and density levels and all of those things, there weren't exactly names given to the type of matter other than like pre-matter, etheric matter, semi-etheric matter. It's like antimatter. Okay, what are these things? As we get into this afternoon a little, they've given us more names. They have to do with chemical realities, the chemical clothes that those levels of matter wear. We've known for a while that density 4 pre-matter is called hydroplasm, which means it's a liquid-based form. It can be basically conceptualized as liquid light, and it's of a higher frequency that doesn't appear as liquid in this dimension. It appears as invisible in this set of density dimensions down here in this density. There are other body structures that we have. And the closest, I think, that information has come here has come through maybe in the last 100 years when people that were mediums in the old days, that now the new word for a medium is a channel, people who used to go into trance and let things come through them and talk to them, there would often be phenomena that left a ghost image in the air, and there would be fibers and strands of stuff hanging in the air. The stuff, they called it ectoplasm. That was the name the people down here created. The plasm part was correct. There are several types of plasm, which are interwoven strands of pre-chemical units, the ionized particulates, that I'll talk about in a little bit, that are a stage of particai, particate, and particum coming into densification. We have bodies made of each of the levels of density of matter. And as we begin to integrate ourselves, we will progressively begin to integrate that level of matter, frequencies and chemicals into the body, which will eventually change the chemical components of this body into that body. We get into manifestation templates. If we can understand that there's a simple transduction sequence, how consciousness transduces itself, morphs itself, changes itself into matter, how it puts its chemical clothing on. It starts with the units of primal substance that I've named, particate, partikai, and particum, the trinity of creation, which is a form that everything is built upon. It starts with the 1 that becomes the 2 that becomes the 3. This goes into the physics of atoms and the physics of particles that happen before atoms and of particulates that happen before that. But there's a process of these partikai units, these 3 partikai units, 1 representing the whole and the other 2 representing smaller divisions of that whole that have broken down into polarization. They're actually consciousness moving back into source as 1 and flashing off, disappearing out of manifestation, and then flashing back on into polarity, back into particle and antiparticle reality field. There's a part of us at all times that is stationed within the expansion of source, that is not in polarity. That is how God is with us all the time. it moves so quickly. Our atoms and our subatomic particles and our particle, particle, and particum flash on and off so fast that we don't see our bodies disappear. But when you begin to slow time down by changing your vibration here, by activating different frequencies in the body, it's really neat because everybody appears and disappears. They poof, poof, poof. And they all do it at a different sequence. It's like a bunch of Christmas tree lights. This was an analogy that you used that was very good. Christmas tree lights that turn on and off. Did you ever see those flasher light sets? They come out with like 8 different rhythms you can set on the dial. Kind of like that, where you have, say, one big long group of those all connected, but they're all choosing a different flash line sequence. That's what it looks like. And somewhere in there, there is absolute stillness, which is the foundation upon which the action of flashing on and off can take place. And it's the action of flashing on and off that allows the chemical clothes to come into manifestation and out of manifestation. On the scientific level, it's kind of interesting because that means that what the scientists see when they look through with their electron microscopes and they look at the parts of atoms and molecules and subatomic particles, there's a time thing going on. They're seeing a part of the reality of the manifestation of those particles, but they're not seeing, because their instruments cannot pick up the frequency or the speed or the angular rotation of particle spin. The points where those particles disappear, turn completely into something else, and then come back again. What's really interesting is when we get into subatomic particles that make up our body mass, they're not just particle X, Y, and Z. Protons, electrons, neutrons, these things. These things actually transmute into each other. Protons become electrons, neutrons become protons, all sorts of neat things happen. But science misses the transition periods because they're happening so rapidly, some of them, and so slowly, some of the others. They're out of the range of perception, not only of scientists, the brains of scientists, or the brains of humans trying to see it, but also out of the range of the time distortion that you get by looking through a microscope. When we look through microscopes and telescopes, if we remember this is a holographic projection, we are using lenses that bend light, which means it's creating sound waves, which means it's changing interrelationships between templates. It allows us to see certain levels of the microscopic kingdom, and allows us to see levels of the macroscopic kingdom that normally our sense facilities would not project out. But the thing is, we do have the sense facilities. If we can see these things through mechanical instrumentations, which are thought forms that were created out of the belief that we needed an instrument to do this because we did not have the ability to see these things ourselves, we don't need microscopes to see our microscopic particles. In fact, we will get a much more accurate assessment of what the particles actually look like and how they behave when we begin to turn on microvision, which is part of the natural senses that start to come with strand 4 activation. That's only 4th dimensional consciousness. We perceive this hologram because our consciousness is stationed 1-dimensional frequency band above. So we see below. 1 dimension below, we see as solid. When we begin to understand what we're seeing in relation to where our consciousness is, and then where our consciousness is in relation to vibration, in relation to frequency, which means in relation to color, we find ourselves with a tool called color that's easily recognized and identifiable as a means to begin to direct where our consciousness is stationed so we can get more control over where our manifestation, what frequency band is going to take place within. There are all sorts of things that when human consciousness is functioning within its hologram the way it was designed to do, we don't need things like microscopes, telescopes, cars, houses, stuff. The ancient civilizations, very ancient ones, hundreds, thousands of years ago, they didn't have a lot of stuff. They didn't have junkyards like we do. They didn't have a problem with disposing of things. And it wasn't because they were primitive cultures at all. In fact, they didn't bury bodies because originally they didn't even die. They went back through the stargates if they were tired of being here. When certain things happened to the DNA where they did die, they didn't die and bury a body. They transmuted it with frequency. And the parts that wouldn't transmute would become dust ashes to ashes and dust to dust. It would all be controlled by the most powerful source force in the universe, thought. Because thought is the director of frequency. Everything is formed of frequency. So we're working back right now. We're actually moving back in time. We're evolving back in time, backward, to reclaim the knowledge and the power and the understanding and the mission that was once ours. When we go back to the point of our creation and entry into the hologram, that means we go back to our point of primal substance that exists right now with us, because the creation point is always in the now, just as the ending point is. Your comings and goings and everything in between are right here, right now, and they exist as vibrational energy fields that you can learn to move your consciousness to find out any information you desire that will help you make choices in the present moment time, because it is all happening in the present moment time. When we get into Partakai units, the units do something. They start to what's called accrete, or pull together, draw together by like attraction. So Partakam units will pull together. They will attract more Partakam units. They will actually manufacture more. Every time a Partakai unit is created, and then it goes through a phasing where it replicates itself, keeps the original, and becomes the original split into polarity. It creates a charge and releases another of itself. So they're all over the place. The whole unified field is filled with Partakai, Partakai, and Partakam. And like little people that are lonesome all by themselves, they start to draw together and communicate energetically. Now, yourself as a Partakai unit will not use linear thought patterns and use the English language or the Spanish language or any of the languages that we know. It will communicate in direct cognition, which if scientists were looking at it, would represent an exchange of energy, of electromagnetic frequency. Partakai units build up to form first chains. And this has some relationship, probably not much, to what science was trying to figure out about the universal string theory, where things kind of strung together to begin the formation of the universe. I've not explored the string theory, but I think it has some elements of an understanding, at least some basic rudimentary issues about what Partakai do, even though Partakai aren't identified in it. Partakai, Partakai, and Partakam form first strings or chains or strands of groups of themselves. Then those strands start to interact with each other in different ways, at different angles. So consciousness, because these are units of consciousness, begins to interact with each other at different angles of perception, which is a different electromagnetic charge to begin with. It starts to set in motion energy dynamics that form grids of energy. You could look at it like, kind of like chicken wire. You know, a chicken wire that has thin wires with lots of holes in between. You could look at a Partakai grid as something like that, but it's made out of little Partakai, Partakai, and Partakam units. Now, as the Partakai, Partakai, and Partakam units collect more of like kind unto themselves and form different grids of like charge, so you'd basically have a Partakam grid, a Partakai grid, and a Partakai grid. Now, the Partakai is the original unit that the other two came out of. So that would be the grounding field that the other fields take place within. The Partakai eventually forms antimatter. The Partakam eventually forms what we call dense matter here. And the Partakai forms what we call antimatter. That's where you get particle and antiparticle realities taking place, which implies once we're in density, once our consciousness has adopted the form of a Partakai grid and entered the experience of polarity of consciousness, where consciousness turns in and looks at itself at different angles, we are entering a situation of electromagnetic exchange. We are entering a situation where we are not just moving into a structure that exists outside of us. We are becoming this structure. It implies that a part of us becomes particles, a part of us becomes antiparticles, and a part of us becomes antiparticles. That means you have a parallel double in a place called the parallel universe on parallel Earth. This is part of the self that you'll integrate. Because in density 1, there's a little trick to the relationships between particle and antiparticle and antiparticle. When we get into the structure a little, I'll show you a chart that we put together to explain a bit of the relationship between Earth, what's called inner Earth, and parallel Earth in density 1, and then the density 2 counterpart of the Earth planet system, which is called Tara, and then the density 3 translation of the Earth Tara system, which is called Gaia, and then there's a 4th density template that Earth Tara Gaia come out of that's called Iramatena. The names are actually drawn from the sound tones, the composite sound tones of the units of consciousness as they vibrate and oscillate. They create sound. So when we're working with the material that's given by the Guardian Alliance, by the founders, we're working with word translations into a given language pattern that as closely match as possible the sound vibration of that object or being or thing. That's why in our work you'll find a lot of interesting names for things. Like later we'll talk about the primal life force currents that are called the Kirashe. And then there's the Kundare. These are sound tones. And you have Antankarana and Kundalini. Kundalini was actually not quite a sound tone translation. Antankarana was much closer. There have been pieces of this information brought here for thousands and thousands of years. There's little pieces in this book, in this sacred book, and little pieces in that sacred book, and it's all over the place. But this time we're getting it together. And here we will find that we have Partikai units form Partikai grids. Partikai grids group together and start to pull in more like Particum units. And they begin to build up something called a Kilan, which once the Partikai, Particum, Particum form grids, each of those grids has a different force in relation to electricity. One has a negative polarity, one has a positive polarity, and the other has the dual polarity, which is actually a 3 polarity. It's tripolar. They create 3 different angles of consciousness relating to itself, which is the process of beginning to create the template through which a 3-dimensional hologram that has external space, height, width, depth can be created on the screen of Partikai. So we get to the point where we have Partikai units, Partikai grids that build up to be Kilans, which is the beginning of creating enough Partikai units of the 3 different kind and having them interrelate with each other to form something called a Kilan, which is a crystal. It's a crystallization of thought. It is a crystallization of form. You have Partikai units that exist as not 3-dimensional forms, waveforms, until they reach a certain level of accretion where they build up form structure. This is where you start to get your basic mathematical and geometrical interrelationships that will give you the ability, as they come down in the matter density levels, the ability to project out things that have different shapes. So Partikai, Particum become grids, their chains become grids, then they become Kilans. Now, Kilans do the same thing. They pull more of like particles, but now they're 3-dimensional particles, or the pre-dimensional particles. These are the things that will form dimensions, but they're not quite dimensionalized yet. Kilans form Kilan codes, which are composite groupings that reach a certain level of critical waveform, critical thrust. I would say critical mass, but they're not into mass yet. So it would be critical thrust or electrical component. Once they become Kilan codes, they become what is called a scalar wave. It is a spherical, standing, particle, antiparticle, antiparticle wave that is a fixed point in a grid, kind of like, imagine it like a little flame that stays put and it's self-sustaining. It's a flame of consciousness that flashes off and on. When it flashes on, it becomes part of and manifests within the primal light fields and the dimensionalized light fields that we call the hologram of space-time. And when it flashes off, it goes back to its first state, which would be sound. So the qualities we call light and sound emerge from the interreactions between partike, partikai, and particum, between chelons and chelon codes. Now, each dimensional level is created by a very specific mathematical formula for how many partikai units will be in that particular dimension and what will their rhythm of flashing on and off be. That's what creates dimensionalization. Dimension 1 will have the slowest flash and on and off rhythm. That's the lowest frequency. Flashes on and off slow. Go up to D15 and flashes on and off really, really, really fast. The difference in flashing can be translated into the concepts or the realities of vibration and oscillation, which are two different things. When a partikai unit, when a chelon, when your template flashes off, it contracts. It goes into energy holding instead of energy transmitting. It goes into a magnetic polarity that is vibration. When your template turns back on, you come back into the manifest hologram. You go from going into contraction, actually becoming sound, into vibration, becoming the vibration of sound, into becoming light. That is oscillation. So oscillation is like turning the lights on, and vibration is like turning it off. Oscillation is energy transmission or releasing, expansion of energy. And vibration is turning the light switch off, contracting the energy, and holding the energy inside. So here's a little trick in the New Age movement. Everybody said, oh, you have to raise your vibration, raise your vibration. No, you don't want to raise your vibration because you lower your frequency by raising your vibration, which means you go downward in the dimensional scale, not up. Which means you make your particles more dense, not more light. There are little tricks that if you don't realize some of the basic differences on how our consciousness, when it becomes chemical clothing and when its template interreacts here, that we can get so easily tricked for doing things or telling ourselves statements which are words to us but become mathematical coding instructions to our body template. If we say, I want to raise my vibration, you are saying, I want to lower my frequency, become more dense, and contract my energy, not expand it to hold the rest of myself. So little tricks like this of understanding the physics are very, very practical. Because at least you know one thing, well, if I want to expand, which means I want to pull in more frequency into my body, which will de-densify my body progressively and make it grow less and less dense while my consciousness grows more and more expanded. This is how you transmute yourself back out of the hologram into at one with Source. You realize that you don't want to raise your vibration. You want to raise your oscillation rhythm. You want to make your flash line sequences, the turning off of partikai and particum in your particum in your body, go more quickly. So the physics are important if spiritual development is important to you. This is where science and spirituality, science and religion, are both erroneous in their approaches. They both have a little bit of the picture, and they think they have the whole picture, and they don't. If we do not understand what we're telling ourselves with the words we choose, not realizing that they're mathematical instructions that turn into scalar waves that interact with the scalar waves in our template and create change, we are not going to get control of our spiritual integration process, no matter how hard we try to worship God, whoever, whatever that might be. We will never feel the full waking awareness of the I am God and I am totally at one with God connection that everybody that cares about being spiritual is looking for. So the physics are sacred and they are holy just as much as the spiritual teachings have been. And if you run into teachings out there, I don't care if they're traditional teachings that tell you it's evil to know that stuff, or, I mean, some people that work with the Bible use it that way. I mean, they twist certain things and they've added certain other books to help it along, where they teach you that you're going to go to hell if you learn this stuff. Why? Because somebody put those books there because somebody has a vested interest in controlling your power and using it for something else that's not your agenda but theirs. And if you use these mechanics, you will get in touch with you and your direct connection to God. Therefore, you won't need a personification or externalization of a God as if it was your creator, because you will know you are your creator because there's a part of you that is always at one with God. So we can look at the division between science and religion as part of the polarity problem here. There's a drama of polarity taking place on our planet. It's polarity that's gone out of balance. And as we learn the science and learn how it fits with the spirit, we get back into bringing that balance back to ourselves. And piece by piece, we heal not only ourselves, but we heal the planet as we do it. Once we get to the point where we have scalar waves, those little waves that stand still, movement is created not by the scalar waves moving. They're not waves that move from point A to point B. They simply stand and flash off and on. But when they flash on in one place, they appear there, and when they flash off, they appear somewhere else from where they're flashing off. Everything is actually taking place in the same space, and all the scalar waves are taking place in the same space too. But it's the rhythm of their expansion and contraction, flashing on and flashing off, that creates the reality that many multiple reality fields that have their hologram and their chemical clothing can take place in the same exact location of space, all at the same time, yet appear to be separate from each other and invisible to each other, creating a multitude of huge universes and vast reality fields. It's all happening in one space, at one time, at one moment called now, in one area called God or Source. And the physics are what show you how that can happen. So the mental body can go, oh, that does make sense. Yeah, I guess God is real. Because here we're taught, you either believe God, in God, I got somewhere, blindly, and pick up an old book that's going to tell you how you have to behave in order to get this God's approval, so you don't go into this God's judgment. And I look at it this way. If the God, the way they're presenting it, knows so little about love, I'll fend for myself. If God was really like the books are telling us, a vengeful, wrathful God that will wipe out things on purpose and send you to hell if you can't figure out what you're supposed to do to try to be good. This is an old concept of certain forms of man or woman or fallen angelic putting their own attitudes, calling God themselves, and giving us images of God, taking our teachings that were really about this, about the sacred sciences of the sacred spirit that allowed each one of us to know we were God. Those teachings were twisted, edited, and taken to take us totally off track. Why? Because we're holographic projectors. We're thought form generators. If somebody's interested in our planet, and we were the security team, and somebody was interested in taking our power away from us so we could no longer function as the security team, but it would be very difficult to try to physically go in and force yourself onto the planet, because if you did, you'd have a whole lot of Star Wars happening over your head from the Guardian races that would come in and stop you. If you can trick them into creating their own prison, their own perceptual prison, by feeding them, first you'd have to do something to the DNA so they forget their higher dimensional parts. Then you need to feed them some thought forms to get them going on a new track of development that gets them to use the creative power, the scalar wave generation, to create a hologram where it appears that there's an external God. There's an external God that's planning to come down and fleet and visit us one day and say, oh, my children, we're back. We created you. Now do this. Our thought forms that we've been using since 22,000 BC, 25,500 BC, have been intentionally seeded to create distortion in our consciousness and to create illness and disease in our bodies. So the last age span we used to have was about 800 years. Before that, we were eternal. We just could transmute whenever we wanted to. We didn't die. Our thought forms have been used to imprison us. And it's actually us, the parts of ourselves that are in our molecular consciousness and the parts of ourselves that are in our elemental consciousness that are holding us imprisoned in density 1. We have been constantly having to reincarnate and put our consciousness back in a density 1 form because we haven't been able to get out of here frequency-wise. We haven't been able to hold in our templates the higher dimensional frequencies that would allow us to merge with that level of consciousness, change the angular rotation of particle spin, and take ourselves to the higher density levels. But that's kind of good that this has happened, because if our thought forms are what are imprisoning us, that have created a self-regulating police force right within our own bodies, that means our thought forms have the ability to be our liberators as well. And that's what we're doing. When we get to the point of understanding, we have a template that's made of partikai units, partikai, partikai, particum, chelons, and all of those things, chelons, chelon codes. We can look at that as the crystal body, the scalar wave body that flashes off and on, is the crystal body. It's formed of things called fire letters, which are specific organizations of scalar waves that exist for each dimension. If you think of the cosmic template has 15-dimensional structure. Okay, you have primal sound fields I'll talk about later, 15-dimensional structure. Each one of those dimensions has a very specific organization of partikai units that have a very specific flash line sequence, flashing on and off. Now, anything that's going to come into manifestation in that reality field is going to take on, as part of its core template, that particular structure of partikai units. So, the universe, the cosmos and the universe, is made of fire letters, which are groups of chelon codes that hold the scalar waves into particular arrangement that allows for dimensionalization so the hologram can be projected. We have a piece of that template right in us. Part of the core of our template is a microcosmic version of the macrocosmic cosmic template. So we are made of fire letters. We have fire letters within our bodies that literally anchor the portions of our consciousness into each dimensional band. Each of our DNA strand templates that forms a portion of our chemical DNA corresponds directly to one of those dimensional bands, which means that the template is made of the fire letters that make up that particular dimensional band. When we talk about the density levels of matter, we have first, coming from source expansion, we have first a contraction that creates a void. This is before we enter dimensionalization. We have expansion that creates a void, then a projection that creates the first sound. In the beginning was the void, and then in the void there was the word, the first sound of creation, which was the first vibration, because sound is made of vibrational movement, of energy holding, that makes units of energy move, that creates sound. So the first sound started the formation of the framework that we could experience manifestation within. There is something called the primal sound fields, or the kundare, primal sound fields. And within those primal sound fields, by taking sound and the partikai scalar units that are turned off but just vibrating, and turning part of them around and changing their polarity in relation to each other, light was created. That's what the symbol of the Vesica Pisces, the two interwoven circles, refers to. The sound field and the light field. And that space in between is where the hologram occurs. We have the sound field, the light field, and then dimensionalization starts. That's where the flashline sequences start to differ from each other. First you have partikai, then you have partikai turned off as vibration, sound, then you have partikai all turned on and staying on, primal light fields. There are 3 levels. You have the blue, the violet, and the gold light spectrum. And then within those is where dimensionalization takes place, as the flashline sequences of the scalar waves are syncopated. Some go on, some go off. They all have different rhythms, like they're doing little dances, but standing in one place doing them. Our DNA templates and our body templates hold a microcosmic version of that macrocosmic cosmos. We have in ourselves a level of primal light field, of primal sound field, and of each of the 15 dimensions that take place within that. When we're dealing with the first 12 dimensional levels, which right now we're in D1, 2, 3. So we kind of start where we are and move upward into expansion. The first 12 levels have a particular type of flashline sequence that creates, from here we would progressively expand up to there. Then when we hit dimension 13, there's actually a contraction point that you have to contract to a point, shift in your partikai relationship, angular relationships to each other, before you can expand back out the time matrix again. So the first thing we deal with are the first 12 dimensional levels of our consciousness and ourself. That's our pre-matter template. It's called the Maharic shield. A shield is simply a word that refers to a 3-dimensional scalar template. So there's planetary shields that hold each 3-dimensional level of the planet's consciousness and its matter that translates into matter, chemical clothes. And we have shields. Our Maharic shield is our divine Christos blueprint. The word Christos responds to the D12 frequency. That's what the person who became known as Jesus in the Bible was trying to explain to the people of the times, was that he didn't say, worship me, I'm your Christ. In fact, that being is not really happy about what's happened to that message, because that being taught you, you have your inner Christos. Joshua and the people that worked with him taught the inner Christos, that you have a D12 pre-matter template through which you and your body are always indelibly connected to Source. And it is through bringing your matter template here, up through the density levels, back to the pre-matter template, that you can gain mastery over moving in and out of the hologram at will. They were the original teachings of Christ. You look at what's in the Bible now, I swear there's like 3 or 4 different ones to begin with, because they there's some very strange inconsistencies in what's attributed to Christ. First he seems like this, so he'd never do that. Then he gets angry over here. It's like, wait a minute, he said you don't get angry over here. There's some contradictions. That's because most of the things that are being attributed to Christ saying in the Bible were not said by him. They were said by others, some of them part of the Anunnaki races. Now, when we go to our Christos template, we have the beginning of understanding how we have the ability to get not only to get our manifestation powers back, but to get back the wisdom to know how to use those powers well. One of the biggest things for a lot of people that are really good people at heart it's like, oh gosh, if I could actually have the power to manifest anything I wanted to, it's a lot of power. Would I use it right? What if I didn't? What if I created horrible things? What if I hurt somebody? There's a fear because of ancient times and our cellular memory from those other time periods that bleeds through when we start to get our power back, where there's a resistance to having that power, because there were times in our growth process, all of us have gone through dramas in different time vectors, where we had to learn how to use that power appropriately. And if we accidentally used it wrong, or if we got a little too full of ourselves and used it wrong because we just had that delight and, wow, I have power, and trampled a few civilizations in the middle of it, there's going to be guilt attached to using power. There's going to be all sorts of things. But there's a part of us that has always known that we were innocent. Yes? We're over break time?
Way over.
Are we? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. You need a break? All right. Well, all right, we have lunch at 1:30, so if we don't take the break now, we probably won't get to taking the break because lunch is at 1:30. So we can do like a 15-minute now, okay? And then we'll get back. I'll kick out. We're going to be starting in about 2 minutes, everybody, so if you want to get back in your seats whenever you're ready. Now, I have a lot of ground that I want to cover with everybody this afternoon, and we're going to try to wrap up by somewhere between 6:30 and 7, I imagine. Then, for people who want to join us, between 9 and 9:30, we're going to be at Siesta Key Beach tonight, and we're going to be doing some energy work there. We're going to do our first round table, which by the end of today, the people who haven't heard of that before will know what it is. It's a Merkaba, group Merkaba, but done in a way that it does not link your Merkaba fields into the group field where you take on anybody's energy, which is the way most people are teaching Merkaba out there right now, unfortunately. Now, I'd like to finish up a little bit of the information that I was presenting this morning, where I was talking about primal substance and units of primal substance. The information that was given recently, that was part of the beginning of the security clearance data, was making that link between the templates of manifestation, the scalar wave templates of partike, partikai, particum, kilans, kilan codes, and fire letters, linking that terminology up to the terminology the science uses to name identified particles. The in-between stage were the words myon, dion, and trion. We have partikai units that manifest as dions. We have partikai units. Partikai units manifest as trions. They're the ones that hold no charge and the potentiality for both negative and positive charge. they correspond to antimatter particles, which is what the density 5 reality fields are fully made of, the primal light fields. Now, this chart that I put up here, it's a little hard to see because we pulled it on a bubble jet printer, and it's really the mylar this thing is supposed to be for the laser printer, so it didn't print really clear. But this was some of the new information that makes the link for us. And I just want to go over this really quickly so we can understand that we have the template on the side of manifestation that we don't see, and we have the manifestation in the hologram that we're walking around in. This is the meeting point between the outside and the inside, and this is what our thought fields are composed of. We and the other portions of our consciousness that are associated with the particle and the antiparticle, and the antiparticle universes all think thoughts in one of these primary particles. There will be the dominant thought field, will either be a primary trionic thought field made of trions, primary dyadic thought field made of dions, or a primary myonic thought field made of myons. And this has everything to do with what we're seeing when we're seeing the illusion, because what we are seeing as the 3D hologram projected out is either a myon field, a dion field, or a trion field. And depending on which one we're seeing will show us which coordinate we're in. If we want to go to inner Earth, if we want to experience the reality fields of inner Earth, for instance, as real, that is a transharmonic time band that is of higher frequency than here, but closely linked in to our time band on Earth. I'll show you that relationship in a little bit. We would be seeing there the projection of a trion field. It would be made of trion units that came from antiparticles, that came from fully non-polarized particle units. Now, this shows us the chemical clothing, how the myons, trions, and dions become some of the known particles. They have not identified all of the particles because there's a bunch of things that science hasn't even identified, or the fact that all of these particles at different times flash on someplace else as their opposite, and then flash back on over here in different positions. So there's a lot that science is missing. But as far as identified particles and identified forces, energy forces that we know are here and influences are here, this is the relationship of these units to those forces that are part of our hologram. Now, I'm going to read off. If you can't read that, I apologize. This is some of the new material that as soon as the whole translation on it is done, we'll send it. Just make sure we have your address. I think we have everybody's from the registrations, but just so we'll send it to you, so you will have all of this. There'll be a whole bunch of other charts that are probably going to take me 3 days each to do because they're really complicated. But this tells us that on the particle level, the particle were the original units, remember, that have the potentialities of both polarities, but they're not in polarity, so they're like a tripolar. They have the potentialities for no polarity and both. They are particle units, little scalar standing wave units made of particle in the template. The translation point where they start to take on chemical clothes, where they start to become wave forms that create movement rather than just standing still and flashing on and off. And from there, they create what are called, they are particles that are called ionic particulates, which means they have the ability to reverse their characteristics and change their characteristics by influence from each other. So they're not fixed like the templates are, and they move into the illusionary hologram of motion. So we have particle units form trions. Now, the core polarity and electrical orientation of a particle unit would be a dual charge plus its own, because the dual charge actually creates another characteristic in relation to polarity. So it's really a tritone field. It's base electromagnetic. This is where electromagnetic force originates. As we know, we look at electronics and all of those things. Electromagnetic force is what makes this world go round down here. It also makes the world go round from D12, the pre-matter fields, all the way down. And the primal light fields have a relationship to electromagnetism, but it is more separated, where you have magnetic fields separated from electrical fields. And when you get into dimensionalization, after you go through the D12 point, you will start to have them both existing in relation to each other rather than fully separate areas. When we talk about electromagnetism, we're actually talking about the phenomena that causes what we perceive in the hologram as light and sound. Now, light is a translation of electricity. Sound is a translation of magnetism. And electrical and magnetic force are translations of each other in relation to the wholeness. What's interesting about the way dimensions are stacked is light in one field is sound in another. So when we look in our hologram, and if we are perceiving from the third strand, or from D3 consciousness, the light we are seeing is from the dimensional band above. What we are seeing as the stars and the sun and the light that it generates are the reality fields of density 2, dimension 4. What we are seeing as the physical down here on Earth field is a projection of the energy patterns that are in dimension 2. And our consciousness will be stationed right in between the two. What's happening right now is our consciousness is actually stationed in dimension 4. And we're perceiving what's in the D3, dimension 3 energy field. We're perceiving that down here as the Earth hologram. And that implies what we're perceiving when we look up at the stars and the sun and the light and the darkness. We are seeing the reality field of dimension 5, which is the center point of the timelines of Earth's density 2 counterpart, Tara. When the halls of Amente stargates open, we have a blend. There is a blend of this timeline and that timeline, and we have the ability, if we know how, to shift our focus of attention into the density 5, or the D5 reality field, which would constitute in the hologram being able to see an area of oscillating energy, because you would sense it, because you would be sensitive to the higher frequencies that were coming in from the higher octaves of dimension 5. A person who did not have that level of strand activation in the DNA would not be able to see it, but you would. Some people have already started seeing what appear as mirages. I had a couple of people at different times in the last couple of years write to me and say, am I losing my mind? Because there's this thing that happened a couple of times, and I know I saw it, but like, am I hallucinating? What am I doing? They talked about seeing cities in the clouds. Not just like animal forms, oh, that one looks like a bunny, not that kind of thing. But literally, the light does something. There seems to be a shift in the light, just a little bit, and it's usually in the daytime that they have the experiences. And they'll see the clouds, but all of a sudden the clouds take on a look as if you're looking over mountaintops, and there's like a landscape there, even to the point where sometimes you can see city buildings. They look like ghost images that are made out of cloud stuff. These are people that were going into fifth strand activation early. They're starting to pick up the density 2 matter forms, and they will first appear as mirages or ghost images. Now, to be able to make that image become real, you have to establish a co-resonance, not with its frequency, but put your consciousness in the frequency band above it in order to experience it as real. If you want to go to Tara and experience D5 as real, you have to put your consciousness in D6 frequency, which means you have to fully activate and sustain activation of your 6th DNA strand template. So there is a total relationship to the hologram here. And it's kind of interesting. We look out in this world and say, oh, there's light, we know there's light, we know there's sound, whatever they are. You know? We just take the right in front of us and we take them for granted because they've always been a part of our experience here. But we're not taught what these things really are. The scientists will kind of poo-poo the concept of interdimensional spectrum, at least a lot of them do. Yet they'll analyze the heck out of light waves and sound waves, but they don't know what they're playing with. They don't realize they're dealing with a collision of interdimensional phenomena into one space that creates the hologram itself. When we go into the 3-day particle conversion period that I'll talk about more tomorrow, it's an interesting period of time. It's when all sorts of frequency bands run into each other, and you'll end up seeing a reality that has to do with where your DNA activation is, because that will position your consciousness in relation to this collision of frequencies all over the place. 3-day particle conversion, I'll tell you one thing, will have 3 days of darkness involved with it. And after the 3 days of darkness and the changes that take place there will be 3 days of light. These have to do with the physics changes that will be taking place in the atmosphere as Earth passes through the division point between density 1 matter and density 2 matter. It creates changes on the planet that, depending on how the stargates are working, if they're not working well and things are not going well with the planetary grids, can be catastrophic. We're not aiming for that. In fact, if the Guardians hadn't gotten involved in 1986, I think, 1983, they spotted the problem, that the place was going to go into pole shift because the Templar is damaged. When the stargates opened, we weren't going to go through stellar activation, we were going to go into pole shift. That's why the intervention was given at this time. So we're having a lot of help. There's going to be a lot of more interesting things we're going to talk about tomorrow when we get into more of the guts of what's going on now and what it appears we're being prepared for. It's a lot sooner than I was prepared to prepare anybody for it. I was like, yeah, I'll get used to this by 2012, and then because it's really, there's a disorientation factor that comes to even the most aware of us. There's a space where you go into where you're sitting there between this reality and that reality, and you know what the perceptions were like here and what you came to believe here and understand, and your mind kind of gets set, and that pattern's in your cellular memory now. Then there's these whole new set of concepts that are coming. They're saying, and it's going to do this, and you're going to experience this, and you feel like you're in a science fiction movie. And you kind of sit in between the two and go, believe, not believe, believe, not believe. I'll believe today. I don't know if I believe today. I'll believe today. So it like flips you back and forth between the polarities of it. There's a stabilizing point that you can come to where you realize that there will be one version of a timeline that the events of seeing the halls of Amente open won't happen, because the people who will not be able to hold the frequency of the transitions of the planet base moving up will go into a different time cycle, into the Phantom Earth time cycle. They will see a different reality that involves learning about the fact that ETs do exist and they're not all friendly. That's kind of what's on the agenda for the Phantom Earth time matrix. Now, it helps as we move into something as major, and it is major. A stellar activation cycle is major. A 3-day particle conversion period is almost unfathomable. Now, I have a lot of cellular memory open, and I've been on this planet, and I am on this planet in several other periods where stellar activations are occurring. 2 other periods. And unfortunately, in both of those periods, right after they consummated or the gates began to open, and they start with vortices. There are 7 planetary vortices that progressively begin to open over a series of years. The first opening of the interdimensional vortices, so with Vortice 4, started in the year 2000 here. Now, progressively every 4 years, another one is supposed to open, building up to the year 2012, when the halls of Amente gates to here and to inner Earth, which takes you up into the higher densities, opens the gates to the higher densities, were supposed to open. I've been here, and I am here in other space-time locations, in other stellar activation cycles, where at the point where it consummated and the first gate started to open, the place was literally attacked, spaceships in the sky, that kind of stuff. And it was... the gates were shut. Because something like that happens, the halls of Amente have to be shut. Because if they are invaded by force and fallen angelic forces get control of the Crystal Pylon Temple network, that network is spliced into the 12 primary universal stargates in this time matrix. They could literally use the halls of Amente to shut this time matrix down from D11 down, where they could hijack the whole time matrix. That's why they're after Earth. That's why they're after the halls of Amente stargates. The history line that this planet is coming from right now holds the illusion of a past, a set of thought forms, a frequency field that this moment is being created from, in which there were cataclysmic changes that occurred rather than the victories. We took the lower sub-frequency bands. In every moment, there is a choice. You have 3, actually. You have the point of union, which would be the Partakai frequency field, the trion frequency field. You have the dion frequency field, which is an electrical charged field, which would represent the higher tone frequencies. Or you have the myonic field, that would represent the lower tone frequencies. And we have the choice as to which, by what ideas we choose, which outcome will resonate with our bodies. The thoughts we choose to accept as what is going to be the outcome will determine, they will set a pattern of frequency in our bodies. It will activate a parthi that go with one of those timelines. The past that It's part of the planetary and race karma pattern, or the imprint that's coming up from the part of the hologram we would call the past. Involves several cataclysmic events and a history of them that have progressed up to this point. But we are at a point where all those time periods are lining up and opening to each other. This is our chance to take the higher octave this time and bring them together into a point of union where we can transmute it to the next highest level. This planet and its people and the consciousness on this planet, including the plants, minerals, rocks, everything, has been trapped here from 25,500 BC forward. They've not been able to get out of this particular density in this time matrix because of certain things that were done to the planetary grids that blocked the body's ability to hold higher frequency. So even if you would die the body here and leave the body, your consciousness could not pick up enough momentum to make the shift in angular rotation of particle spin needed to get your consciousness out of density 1 and into density 2 incarnational cycles, or holographic projection cycles. This is a time of great freedom that we're moving into. So when we begin to understand some of the basic physics involved and how our thoughts literally plug right into those physics, we can start to get in touch with the power that we have. And it's a new way. It's like relearning how to think. The first part is assimilating what the new thought is. Oh gosh, that is the hologram. And after a while, when you keep reminding yourself that, wow, when I'm seeing light in 3D, I'm seeing the D4 sound field. When I'm seeing, you start to interpret what you're seeing in a way more closely resembling what the reality of it is. It takes a while for that new pattern, that new thought pattern, to reach a critical mass resonance of energy, which means where it gets as much energy into it as the old pattern had, where it has the power to then drag the old pattern into it and transmute it and bring the whole thing up to a new experience and a new healed thought pattern. So there will be a moving back and forth as we learn to understand things like that, where we go, what was I seeing again? Okay, it's a hologram. I got that far. Now, how did that work? Was it a trion field, a myon field, a dion field? Wait a minute. So there'll be a process of reminding ourselves to remember what it is. And as soon as you do, you're opening the doorway for more information and more perception, more awareness, and more frequency, and thus more DNA activation to come in to your body. So when we get into the fields that are created, we have the part of Chi units create trions, the part of K units create dions, and the part of cum units create myons. The trions have the dual charge plus its own, so it makes it a tritone charge. They're base electromagnetic. Part of K units are positive electrical. Okay? That means their electrical orientation is positive. You know how on a battery you have the negative polarity side and the positive polarity side? Well, this would be, the dions would have the positive electrical. They're considered base electric because of this. That means they have primarily a transmitting force and a transmitting purpose. They're not the ones that draw energy. They're the ones that push it out, which means they oscillate rather than vibrate, which means they move energy into a field instead of taking it out. Now, part of cum create the myons. They are the negative electrical orientation, or the electrical polarity. They are base magnetic. They are the particle units that will draw in energy from a field and send it to the part of K particles, the base electric particles, who will then transmit it out. Now, the process by which this occurs, there's a graph that we were attempting to work on yesterday when they were showing me parts of this. This graph is like a nightmare graph. Then myons at D1, I mean, it changes all the way up, and then you have literally three dimensional scales running, interwoven with each other. You have the one that goes with the particle universe, or the particum universe. You have the one that goes with the anti-particle universe, the base electrical one, which is that's anti-particle, that's from the part of K. And then you have the one in the middle, which is the inner Earth timeline, which is made of the trions, and it's the part of Chi universe. And they're literally all interwoven with each other. It is because of this that the symbol image, which is a mathematical coding of the Vesica Pisces, becomes important. Because in this graph that I hope to get done at some point, it shows you where Merkaba fields are created, counter-rotating spirals of electromagnetic energy, which create spheres of energy, which then intersect with each other at specific angles. Each dimension would have a circle in it that's a sphere, and then in between each one, where the crossover line is, there would be the center point of another sphere, and you start to get Vesica Pisces going all the way up the dimensional scale. There's a mathematical code that allows for the shifting of angular rotation of particle spin back into its wholeness. That symbol will be used later this afternoon. We're going to be using the symbol in a beginning way, where we're going to heal or to raise to the next highest level of expression any thought form here. The secret is to combine it with its opposite. If there is a negative condition, it implies it has a positive condition existing in the anti-hologram, right? You need to bring the two of them together, and they literally undergo fusion and then fission. They fuse, throw off energy. That energy actually jumps an octave, picks up momentum, and the pattern manifests at a higher level, which is a more harmonic and harmonious level than density 1 and density 2. There's a way to use the Vesica Pisces where you can progressively, with each strand template, begin to take each part of your particle base and assist it easily on a daily basis to begin its transmutation process of progressively combining its polarity, which manifests in polarity thinking, where you have, if one part of you is thinking a happy thought, you're experiencing the happy thought, you have a part of you in the parallel system that's experiencing its downside. This is how thought works here. And there is a point, this is where the twists on the teachings we talked about last night, where there is an element where detachment is useful, but it must be engaged detachment. If you go into a space of detachment, it's like standing, looking at the Vesica Pisces, standing in that center point that is where the hologram manifests, and saying, I won't touch either of the other circles. You don't get anywhere. What you need to do is create that condition of reaction in yourself. Choose a reaction to circumstance where you fully know that, okay, I feel about this today. It's not a happy feeling, so therefore it's negative. It's telling you that it's made out of myons. What you need to do is combine it with this dion grid, and you bring its positive and its negative together into the center point, and they will transmute and jump an octave, which lightens the whole thing, which on a feeling level makes it feel less dense, more expansive, and happier altogether. And you've healed the negative side. The way to heal negativity isn't to abolish it. It's to love it, as they say. And if you can understand love as a state of vibrational harmonization that transmutes the negative back to its divine right state, then loving it makes more sense. There's a lot of people that go and say, oh, well, whatever it is, you still have to love it. You can't resist it, so I welcome everything in. And boy, these people eventually find out an interesting lesson in manifestation. You let everything in and just love it without knowing what you're doing when you're loving it. And because there have been teachings given here that twist the meaning of love, you tend to let all sorts of things enter your biofields that you never intended, and you're still loving it because you're told you're supposed to love it to make it go away, right? Loving it is reaching a state of harmonization with it, which you cannot do if you are judging its value. Things are of equal value in the hologram, but they have a different experience of sensation with them, and you have a right to have a preference of which you choose to experience, realizing that there will be a part of your consciousness while you're in density that will experience the other. And you can start to help the other portion of yourself, and that portion of yourself can start to help you by meeting in the middle point of engaged detachment, where you let both sets of feelings move through. If you have the happy end right now, try to just lean into a little, what would be the unhappy end of this, and see if a feeling comes up. Doesn't mean you want to hold it. You're just going to let it move through. You're going to help the part of you, and if it's stuck, you're going to be stuck. So it's worth helping that part of you that's not in this hologram, it's in the anti-hologram. To bring the feelings together and try to see the full spectrum. where you have what's called a base tone, which is a lower resonating thought form, and an overtone, which is called the higher resonating thought form. The overtone is the antiparticle, which is a dion field, which interestingly, we as Mayan consciousness in the universe we're in project out the dion fields. What we're seeing is a dion grid when we see our hologram. We're actually seeing the higher harmonic, which means this is good compared to what this looks like on parallel, right? Parallel Earth is going through the same type of experience as we are. They move a little bit ahead of us in the timeline, and they've had a terrible experience with this particular set of events. It will affect us if we do not embody that experience and then take it someplace else. We meet it in the middle. We meet it in the inner Earth timeline. And the consciousness of us that's stationed in parallel Earth won't get stuck there. Because if the parallel self gets stuck in a density level, so does its anti. You need both of them to come together and bring the consciousness together to be able to go up to the next level. So on a mass level, this is what's going on behind the scenes. Parallel Earth began its period of pole shift in, it was about a year ago. I think it was November. So I think it was last November that they told us that in their timeline, our last November was 2008. What this would mean is if we didn't do something over here to alter this pattern, it would naturally transfer over. It's like negative positive space. In the same place, the image would flash on over there, then it'd flash off there and flash on over here. We would be seeing a very close version of what they saw, unless we made a major thought field shift in the meantime that incorporated that thought field, which means becoming aware that it exists and it's part of us, and taking it, combining with it what we see is here, and taking it using energy and thought to a higher place on a large level. We would have, when we hit 2008, experienced the same thing. And it would have been the cataclysmic end that was foretold in biblical revelations. But biblical revelations was highly edited and twisted. There was an agenda that wasn't the Guardian's agenda that was added to portions of that book that told us they combined certain elements of particle conversion with certain other ideas that came from Anunnaki races and Draconian races that made it look like it was okay to have this struggle of good versus evil and all of that kind of thing, and God was going to save the good guys and everybody else was going to go through pain and misery. Now, it was put in a way that made it look like God was a very judgmental person. Like God was mad at those sinners because they didn't follow the rules in this book, therefore he was going to punish them. He, of course, was going to punish them and make them go into fire and brimstone where they would be miserable. And only the 144,000 good ones would ascend and disappear before your eyes. And if you weren't one of the ones that disappeared, that means you're stuck here. That means God must be mad at you or something. Time to repent, this whole thing. What has the translations that are in Revelations now were originally part of the truth of the books of John the Baptist and Jeshua that had told about the realities of physics involved with particle conversion and what needed to be done with the inner Christos and the inner energy fields to move through it safely, and that if you didn't, there would indeed be a phantom earth reality created. It also did tell about a battle between fallen angelic forces and the guardian protector forces, because that battle was set in 2326 BC, when in the last stellar activation cycle, the guardian groups literally shut stellar activation cycle down just as it started, where they still had time where they could stop it, because the Anunnaki invaded and tried to take over. So there was a lot of truth to biblical revelations, but a lot of distortion on, wait a minute, what does this mean to us? Does it mean we're supposed to, if we don't follow everything in the book, and if we don't follow the Pope or the other guy, or like how many people use the Bible now and say the other ones are wrong? You can't even figure out who you're supposed to follow if that were the solution. There are some truths in the Bible and there are some twists in the Bible. But the Revelations book was intended to tell us and prepare us for what we needed to do with our bodies, what we needed to do with Merkaba, in order to move ourselves successfully through these transitions and to finally end the problem that Earth has been having and the angelic human races have been having down here with fallen angelic invasion. It involved something that we'll talk about tomorrow that some of you have already heard about from some of the other workshops, which is the planetary Christos realignment mission, which was the reason that humans were seated here in the first place, that had to do with getting the planetary shields, or the scalar wave blueprint of this planet, back to its natural D12 pre-matter configuration, so the energy lines could link up again between D12 running all the way down here. That would create something called a Maharic seal, a D12 frequency seal, that is a natural occurrence in a person or a planet if you have all of the scalar wave aparthy units in the template open to receive the 12 dimensions of frequency that go with the 4 densities of matter. So it's simply, we are going to heal the planetary grids, and that would stop the conflict that has been out of balance. Conflict, there will always be some degree of tension. If you didn't have some degree of movement of tension and polarities, you'd have a completely static universe and you'd have no movement, which is really the reality of how things are. There is technically no movement. It's all taking place in the same space. But to experience the hologram, it requires some degree of negative and positive interacting with each other. But when the balances swing so far in one direction, which implies somewhere they're swinging so far in the other direction, that it's going to literally keep both sides locked in time and change that format, where one side can literally destroy the framework that both exist within. That means the consciousness in that hologram would get fragmented back to units of space dust, and it would not have the opportunity to experience the joyful feelings of what it means to evolve and embody progressively more until you expand to become one again with Source. So the fact that this time matrix, this planet, has gone into the negative pendulum swing. And there's been things in the Hindu teachings talked about the yugas, and I believe they call it the Kali Yuga. That was the dark cycle. Well, we've been in a dark cycle. We call the words that are used in the CDD place are euagos. It's spelled differently. It's E-U-I-A-G-O. And I'm not sure what the Hindu translations of time are, but a euago is a one harmonic universe time cycle. Harmonic universe is one density level for a planet. How long it takes that planetary body to get projected into that framework and to accrete all of the frequencies into it, which will activate all the frequencies in its template, which will then allow it to move up and shift into the next harmonic. That's natural evolution for planets and for people. So we have been stuck for numerous cycles here. It's 22,556 years. 26,556 years is one euago time cycle for Earth. We have been stuck here for over 200,000. This planet has been stuck in its time band going round and round and round in this frequency because of things that have been damaged. And the humans were put here to assist in healing this, so the planet and every species on it could evolve. Because it's not something that's just affecting us. Every plant, every animal, every mineral, every unit of conscious air, every elemental consciousness, every particle unit down here has been stuck in this time matrix. It's been like a prison in density 1. This was the time when it was supposed to be healed, when all of the right elements came together, where the pendulum that had swung so far in the negative here and so far in the positive somewhere else could be brought back into the middle, and the two could be reunited. Where our timeline is going to go is linked with the inner Earth timeline, which will take us through into union with the extreme happy universe that went too far in the extreme happy, which can take you into really strange spaces of polarity as well.
Is that parallel to even the Anunnaki at D10? Because that was I'm wondering, is there a parallel to fallen angelic that's extremely in the opposite direction like you're mentioning? Is that within our own harmonic universe?
Yeah, which implies somewhere there's humans that you wouldn't want to deal with too. But there are differences in this one fact. Now, there would be the higher and lower aspects, let's say, of each of us, of fallen angelics and angelics that didn't fall. But that doesn't mean humans, for instance, became fallen angelics. This is about as fallen as we've got. We never went into the agenda of seeking to take over the time matrix or anything like that. There are degrees of higher and lower that are applied. This time matrix is connected to one that went into the extreme lower frequency, and something happened to it which is called being blown off the grids. That means its template literally blew apart part of its structure, where it can't connect to its parallel structure anymore. So it literally becomes a finite time field like a little circulation of energy that is a time field with a planet in it and with a galaxy in it that can't go anywhere. It can't bring in higher dimensional frequency. And the more times it repeats its own time cycle and keeps pulling in more and more and more of the density 1 particles, it gets denser and denser and denser and more magnetic and more magnetic. And eventually all of its energy pulls into its core and it implodes. So that's where Phantom Earth is going. That's the time band it will be drawn into because of its co-resonance. Now, this time matrix didn't have that bad of an experience, but it was headed in that direction. We would have merged with that time matrix if the intervention wasn't given. So there's a lot more that I'll talk more on the planetary level of things when we get into tomorrow, because there's some things I want to get through today first that have to do with us and thought, with us as individuals, so we can begin to understand some of how we can shift our thinking to allow us to use our thought processes in a way that support us, rather than in ways that they just seem to be on autopilot, and once in a while you get lucky and things turn out in your life the way you'd really like them to be. Usually it's just not too bad, so it's tolerable, so you deal with it. But there are things that we can learn about thoughts. Where do they come from? Where do they go? I can give you, with those questions, a basic understanding of it. This is where those really monster diagrams I was talking about, where they show the flow of energy from one dimension to its counterpart in the inner earth, to its counterpart in the parallel, and then back through here, all the way up the 15-dimensional scale. And they show what angle of rotation of particle spin happens between each one. I won't be able to, off the top of my head, take you through all of that. But I can basically explain that when we have dimensional structure, there is, in fact, I'll use the time matrix one for this, honey, please. This is the basic structure of relationship of energy when we talk about dimensionalization. Now, what this shows here is, first, if you consider out here, the thing that has no borders, that just goes off infinite, would be source. So this exists, let's say, as a thought form within the mind of source. And it's not a flat thing laying there in the mind of source. It is a set of energy relationships that allows for certain experience to be known. What we have first here, these first 3 bands in this diagram, are called the primal sound fields. These are where the particle units are in their off position. It's a field of vibration, which is sound. Now, here, this border here, that literally defines an area in source, where source is limitless, boundaryless. First, a contraction of source's attention takes place. It creates a contraction, a single point of focus within itself, in order to create from that point. So this is called a magnetic repulsion zone, where this black line is around the outside. It's a way of moving consciousness that creates a force of resistance that allows parameters to be set within itself. Parameters to allow for the creation of a specified thought field. So we have what we consider the void. We have source, the void, that's where in the beginning was the void, and in the void was the sound, the first word of God. God spoke, and then there was light, right? Here's that. Now the void. The sound fields. There are 3 levels to the sound fields. One is what will manifest when it turns to light as the particle field, one that manifests as the particle field, and one that manifests as the particum field. They are sound tones. They have the sound tones going this way of kundara. That's where kundare comes from. It can be pronounced kundara or kundare. But that's where the word for the kundare, primal life force currents, sound currents, comes from. They are the first currents of consciousness projected from source through the void that forms the primal light fields. These 3 levels here, dimensions 15, 14, and 13, form what's called harmonic universe, HU 5. They are the first translation of these sound vibrations into turning on the light switch and taking vibration and moving it into oscillation, where the standing scalar waves turn on into their on position. So this field flashes off but its imprint and potentiality is always held there, and it turns on here as the primal light fields. So you have the void, the sound, and the light. That's what the creation stories were trying to explain to us in very simple terms. In the ancient of days, simple terms weren't used because it was just explained like this. These diagrams were actually very, very ancient. They're translations of very, very ancient pictograms that were used without having to put the numbers in. The image itself held a mathematical encoding, and by looking at it, one would get direct cognition of all of the information it contained, which is a lot more than you can stick on with little paste-up numbers. So there are ways to use the diagrams. Some of the diagrams in these books that you see repeated often, like this one, has been used to show all sorts of different relationships in here. It's in the Cathara books, and it's in the Templar books. This is also a powerful symbol code, a mathematical programming in light and sound and scalar patterns that you can use for meditation that will start to bring lots of information to you, and it will help you activate DNA. All right. So once we get into here, you have, this is called density 5. That's the last of the densities we'll see as we expand outward to source. All right. Our consciousness came in from being at one with source, moved through the void, turned itself into the void, then turned itself into the primal sound fields, then turned itself into the primal light fields, and then began to turn itself in, or embody within itself, the structure of how scalar waves operate and flash on and off. This is how we formed our template to get us into where we could experience the hologram. That right now, we're down here in dimensions 1, 2, and 3. Harmonic universe 1, density 1, matter. That's the heaviest matter form. As you move upward in the scale, you go into lighter and lighter matter forms. As you came in from the primal light fields would be like gaseous light, let's say, if we were going to compare how known substances such as water operates. Well, water can become a gas when it's heated to a certain level. The more flash lines you have, the faster those flash lines are moving. The more movement, the more heat is generated. So these are the hot fields, the flaming light fields, that have basically no density. They are the pure antimatter fields. Now, little subharmonics of these are imbued in all of these, because all of these actually take place within that field. So that's like the background frequency to all the smaller frequencies that other things are built from. Just like source is the background frequency, the quantity of energy within which all the rest takes place. Same thing with these primal light fields up here. When we get into here, where we start to go from density 5 primal light fields, and we have the 3 primal light fields that correspond to the 3 levels of sound, when the first level, the first sound of source, expands into a light field, that's called the ecstatic level, by the way. It's called the ecstatic level of source. It's the first level of individuation, or if we're going upward to expansion, the last level of expansion before you're at full at one-ment. All right? That translates actually into D13 frequency, which is called the blue flame or the blue light field, but it's actually a pale turquoise color. All right? The polaric level translates into the D14 field. That is the yellow light field. It's actually pale yellow, but it's often called the gold light field, and is associated with, this is where we get, some of you that know the work, you have the keepers of the blue flame, the gold flame, and the violet flame. The flames they're talking about are the full set of frequency codes in the template, in manifestation when you're down here, that allow you to anchor these frequencies and bring them in, and the levels of consciousness to go with them. Now, the triadic level of the sound matrix forms D15, which is the violet light spectrum. But it's actually not regular violet. That would be D7 frequency. It's a pale magenta, so it's more of a pale pink look than a violet look. So these are sound becomes light, and then these light fields undergo polarization, where they're broken down into different flashline sequences and syncopated rhythms that create the rays, or the smaller dimensionalized divisions of the primal light fields that give us our full light spectrum, which means it also organizes units of sound. Light and sound are translations of each other. Light is when you flash on the standing scalar waves, which would be going into part K, base electric phase. You flash that off in one time matrix, and it turns to sound. And there's also that same relationship on a smaller level that goes down between each of the dimensional fields. So this is the framework that we're within. We go from primal light into, this is the pre-matter template that I talked about. The D12 pre-matter template, and it's called hydroplasm. That's liquid light. It looks like pale silver liquid light when you see it with the higher vision. The colors of the light spectrum are the wavelengths, what from the human eyes here, what we would perceive if we were looking at a certain wavelength that went with the Partakai units, how high those little standing waves were. You could compare it to understanding it that way. So each of the dimensions has a specific wavelength, and as science here will teach us, wavelength is what determines color to our vision, because our senses are geared in a way to interpret wavelength into color and also into form and distance in the projection of our hologram. That's a key when we're working with energy and with symbols and with getting more conscious control over what we are creating. Because if you want to pick a frequency, if you want to use D5 frequency, and you know what color D5 frequency is, you can direct it simply by directing color. So it becomes a key to unlocking the potential of directing frequency consciously when we begin to understand color translations. They're actually very simple. When we start with D1, working our way up toward pre-matter. Remember, we have density 1, that's the gross matter density. Density 2 is semi-etheric, which means it's about half as dense as it is here, but it still has a definite physical, chemical clothing translation that is part carbon-based, like it is down here. Density 3 is considered etheric matter, which is moving into the silica and selenium, I believe, chemical forms of clothing, which gives you a different type of matter that would look like the ghost images that, when you watch TV and they're going to do a ghost scene, they have this like kind of 2D looking character that comes in that's see-through. Well, that's kind of like the type of matter when you're looking at it from here that it would appear as. But when you're in it, it creates a different type of reality field, but you still feel yourself in a solid body. But it's a solid body that has lots of things like it can do with itself. It can walk through, it can make a wall, and it can walk through it. It's a thought form reality much more closely and obviously than our hologram. And then we have the pre-matter liquid light template that starts at D10 and works up to its full expression, which is the divine blueprint, at D12, where it holds the original imprint of source and self. Now when we're working up this way, each dimension is a wavelength, is a color, is a frequency band. D1 is red, D2 orange, D3 yellow, D4 green, D5 blue, which is like an electric blue color, like the gas flame blue. Okay, D6 is indigo blue, which is more of a deep kind of, it's more of a murky looking blue, but it has a very high resonance to it. And it's actually more in a more intense version of the D5 blue, because it's picking up some of the D7 frequencies, which are violet. All right, D8 frequencies are gold, where it'd be like a metallic, very deep yellowy gold kind of color, as opposed to the pale yellow D14 frequencies. D9 is silver. That would be the just regular silver. There's several degrees of silver that you would see. D10 takes you into what's called the black light spectrum, where you get D10 is like a sapphire color, blue-black. It's like a blue-black light. If you think of blue sapphires, the gemstone sapphire, it's like a blue-black light with a metallic quality to it. D11 is a dark silver, a silver-black light spectrum. D12 on its own, when you first get into its first 6 sub-frequency bands, appears white and goes into pearlescence, and then it picks up the pale silver because it's picking up the D11 band that it's connected to in the antiparticle, and it's blending the two together. This is the point where the two start to go into full transmutation and union, moving back out of form through the pre-matter template and starting to take the pre-matter template itself out of manifestation to pull the consciousness back up through the primal light fields for exiting the time matrix. So there's the basic spectrum. The color charts are in both of those manuals. I don't have any of them separately, but they're in a whole bunch of things. What you'll often see is with the different courses, I put some of the standard graphs in, so everybody gets to have it. If you're not interested in indigo children, maybe you're interested in this, well, it's there too, so you have the basic structure of the information. Okay, I think we're done with this part. Let's see what I have next on the thingies. Yeah, I'll do this one real quick. All right, this one. This just shows you. I'm going to go through this quick because there's probably several of you that have been through a lot of these. You're so sick of seeing these diagrams, I wouldn't doubt it if you want to scream. But those of you who haven't, it can be useful. That's why I'm doing this. All right, now, here we have the actual interface of how the harmonic universes or the density levels are stacked. We have, remember in the circular chart it showed harmonic 1, harmonic 2, harmonic 3, harmonic 4, harmonic 5. That was to show you the basic relationship. If you want to get into how polarity is working in angular shifts and rotational spin, what you end up with is you have harmonic universe 1, then you have harmonic universe 4, which is the prematter template. Then you have harmonic universe 3, the etheric template. Then you have harmonic universe 2, which is the semi-etheric. And then you have harmonic universe 5. There's all of these flippings in angles of perception that take place. It's not that important to know that. If you work with simply understanding the dimensional structure and working with Merkaba, which we'll get into, in the right way, where you're using the right numbers for rotating your Merkaba in the right direction, you will naturally move your particles in harmony with the natural structure. This also shows you that in each dimensional band, there's a harmonic universe, has 3 dimensions. Each dimension has 12 subfrequency bands, 12 primary subfrequency bands. It also has its 12 plus everything below it. When we get up to D12, it has its own 12, but it's 12 times 12, because it has the stuff that's below it. So it has 144 subfrequency bands. So you have D1 has 12, D2 has 24, 36, and you go up in increments of 12. So they're more and more and more powerful types of currents of energy that these systems are made out of. When we work with what is called the Maharata current, we're working with the D12 current that's bringing in the pre-matter current, which is the strongest current that can fully anchor into the Earth's template. But then you can anchor subharmonics of the primal light and primal sound fields, and together they're called the rainbow ray. You can anchor them into the planetary grids for advanced healing as long as you activate the Maharata D12 frequency first. So, for easy terms, the Maharata frequency is referred to as the Christos frequency, the D12 pale silver, liquid light, hydroplasm, Christos frequency. And then you have the Kirashe rainbow ray, which includes what's called the Rishik levels of consciousness and frequency that go with the primal light fields, and the Yanis levels of consciousness and sound frequency that go with the primal sound fields. All right, so that's basically, this one is showing you the currents of creation, where we have our primal, we have source, the void. Here's our primal sound fields. They are the most massive, intense currents. When they anchor here, they are an invisible, standing columnar wave. It's like being inside of, we talked about those little tiny wave points, vibration points, and we're made of them, so they're smaller than us, right? Well, when this current activates, it's as if our whole planet is one tiny little unit within one very big wave. And it is a frequency that has the ability to either hold in manifestation, change anything within the lower templates, or it could, if it were used wrong, which you can't do because you have to run it through the divine blueprint to get it here. If you could run it wrong, you could literally destroy the universe and blow holes in the mind of source as an energy field, which is a condition that source has actually allowed itself to experience in time matrices that have fallen off the grid. So these are the primal life force currents that we're going to be dealing with. We have primal sound currents are called the Kundare. The density 5 primal light field currents are called the Kirashe. The density 4 pre-matter liquid light divine template, Christos template frequencies are called the Maharata. You have the Antankarana frequencies that are the D7, D8, and D9 currents. Those particular, actually the Antankarana includes these, then it includes D4, 5, 6, and D1, 2, 3. So from D9 all the way on down is considered the Antankarana current. It's composed of 3 different Kundalini currents, which are sets of dimensionalized currents. You have the Antankarana, a 9-dimensional current that's broken down into 3 groups. The first one is the Kundalini current that's called the Turic current, TEURIC. That's the D789 current. When you come into density 2, there's the density 2 current. It's called the Doretic current, and it's dimension 456 current. That's a semi-etheric matter current. This is an etheric matter current. And the last Kundalini current is called the Telluric current, which is the dimension 1, 2, 3 frequency. These are the frequencies of energy that run from the base of your spine at the sacral all the way up your spine to give you your main vertical current, your life force currents, to bring the consciousness and circulate it through your body, through your chakra system, that brings your consciousness in. These are the currents of consciousness, the primal currents that your consciousness as an individual uses to move itself into the hologram and to stay there. When a template gets damaged, as this Earth's template has been, and that implies that the life forms have damaged templates on this planet because of the grid damage, which will transfer the damage right in, the same distortion in scalar wave template will go into the part of the person's template that is part of the planet or the animal or the plant. What it does is it blocks the natural set of frequencies that would run in the primal life force currents, which means it blocks conscious awareness from getting into the body. And it also blocks the body from being able to assimilate the natural progression of evolution, which is to be able to project yourself into the hologram and then back out simply by thinking it, simply by intention to do so. That's what we're supposed to be able to do. When we work with the Merkaba techniques that we're going to be doing, now some of you are familiar with them, and some of you they'll be new for. There are several techniques. One is called tribal shield activation, which I'll explain in a little bit. After the tribal shield is activated with sound tones, there's something called the salutations, which this is one of the things we're going to do at the beach this evening. We're going to go out to the beach, for those of you who want to come, about 9 o'clock, because there's too many people here. We can't do a salutation indoors here, because it's a stand-up and spin thing. Because we're going to talk about Merkaba and how it's inside the body. It's inside the DNA template. It's in inside of each level of the particles. Every little subatomic particle is one side of a Merkaba vehicle. But you also have a big one that hangs out in your auric field around your body. And there's a cone that comes down over the top of the head that transmits electrical energy, antiparticle energy, into your body. Pulls dyons in. And there's the other part that brings energy up from the Earth's grids. Brings myons in. It's the balance between those two and their direction of spin that controls all the other ones inside your body, which controls the activation level of your DNA template, and it controls the angular rotation of particle spin for each level of your dimensionalized body system. We have been trapped in time down here because there have been distortions to the planetary grids that made the small little Merkabas inside of our bodies that connect our D1 part of self to D2, or D2 to D3, D3 to D4, where they've made some of them run in reverse spin, where they create a magnetic force, where they repel each other instead of integrate each other. Because the Merkaba on the planet has been spinning in the wrong direction at the wrong rotational speeds since 25,500 BC. The salutations were the ancient rites that were always done by the grid keepers, by the security team for the stargates, that simply help the planetary grid stay in balance and keep the spin of the planetary Merkaba going at its proper speed so it wouldn't have any problems running the stargate frequency. At this point, putting the Merkaba on the personal level back into a healing position is only temporary because the planetary grids hit critical mass and they override what your thought form just did as far as shifting it. What we're being asked to do on a planetary level is create a very powerful type of healing, which is helping to reverse back to its natural spin, the planetary grids, so our own bodies will begin to heal. And we do it as individuals who reset our spin manually. Now, the spin ratios of Merkaba fields, they come from, back to part of K, and part of Chem. There is a ratio of the breakdown between part of K, and part of Chem. If we want to look at it as units of energy thrust, let's say, you have a part of K unit in this density system, in this time matrix, or that's going to form this time matrix, that has 45 units of thrust. And let's say 360 units forms a sphere, a circle, or a hole. So you have 45 units of thrust that form the anti-particle unit. That's the part of K, part of Chi unit. Then you have a replica of that, another 45 units that is then polarized. This is your trinity. You have the whole, and then you have the whole split into two. So you have another one that equals 45 units, but it's split into two. Now, if they're split into two equal units, it'd be static, and they wouldn't spiral. They wouldn't start to create electromagnetic interference with each other, which makes them spiral, which sets movement in motion, or the illusion of movement in motion. The ratio that they were broken down at was the particum scalar waves are built on 11 2/3 units of thrust, and their corresponding particum units that form antiparticles are built on 33 1/3 units of thrust. And you put them together and you get your 45 units of thrust that match the other, which then brings it back around, 45-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin brings them together, and you have 90 degrees. All right? Which implies, if this one time matrix has 90 degrees, how many more time matrix are we directly affiliated with that would create the 360? But our portion of our Merkaba, planetary galactic universal for this time matrix, is the 11 2/3 magnetic spin ratio and the 33 1/3 electrical spin ratio. It is the natural ratio of balance between particles to antiparticles, and it is the balance that allows for those vesica Pisces, where the spheres that are formed by the Merkaba fields can interact and intersect with each other, so you have the ability to move up and down through the dimensional scale at will by thought. It has the ability to set these back in their natural order, because right now, because of the magnetic reversals that are taking place in our Merkaba fields, and our Merkaba fields are outside of us here, but they are also inside of us from every unit of particle and antiparticle that we're composed of. When we have a Merkaba spin that is not spinning correctly, what it is doing is taking each particle unit that we have and breaking it down into a different unnatural ratio of balance. And what we've been running on right now has been a balance of, I think it was 34 magnetic to 21 electrical, which is like hugely dense as far as the magnetic particles. Too many particles compared to not enough antiparticles. Our matter here, as gross matter density, is twice as dense as it's supposed to be in density 1. And the reason our bodies die is because it's death by densification. It's blocking all sorts of things that would happen in the DNA that would create new things in the chemical DNA called nucleotide base chemicals that would allow for us to have our natural base 12 genetic alphabet. We're running on a base 4 genetic alphabet, which means when we talk about bases, they're simply called the nucleotide bases that form the little ladder rungs. If you know the DNA looks like kind of like a ladder, a spiraling ladder. We would actually have not just 4 chemicals forming those rungs, 4 chemical combinations. We would have 12. That's how our DNA is supposed to be. There's another amazing thing happening on the planet because of this distortion, because it's planetary, remember. It's being run through the planetary grids. It's not only human DNA that's being affected. But if we're 12-strand beings, let's say, because that's what the human imprint is, 12 strands of DNA, not 2, not 3, 12. If you turn off most of the template and only leave on the template for strands 1, 2, and 3, the only thing that's going to manifest chemically are strands 1, 2, and 3, which means you're not going to be able to have in your active template the aparte receivers that will bring in your higher consciousness, your soul, your oversoul, your avatar, and your rishi level of conscious identity, which means you're stuck in time as a 3-dimensional single-vector consciousness who can't remember how you got here, why you got here, or what you're supposed to be doing, and you're scared to death of what's going to happen when your body dies because you don't know where you're going to go because you don't remember. That's the condition the humans are in. In the animal kingdom, the animals have been mutated by these planetary grid distortions as well. Their evolution has been stopped in time. It's like being in an evolutionary loop where you just never go up. You just keep going around and around until eventually you burn out. You eventually start to lose thrust, that every time you go through a lifetime where your particles and antiparticles are running in reverse, instead of creating more energy and jumping up, they start to drain more energy. and they start to slow down, and they start to get tired, and you start to burn out till your consciousness progressively digresses backward until you'll be lucky if you can be born as a mineral. And eventually you'll be a mineral that's part of a planet that, if it keeps doing that, will implode on its core will implode, and it will go back to space dust. It's called, I think that's a supernova, I think they call them. Actually, no, I think a supernova is what we see when a planet actually jumps up in the next density. I don't know what they call that, but it leaves a black hole once that happens. So we're in a situation, anyway, where we have DNA mutations that were done on purpose here by fallen angelic races who are visiting again and talking to people in the channeling movement. They're calling themselves Archangel this and Archangel that. One of the favorites is Archangel Michael. And I don't want to offend anybody that might think Archangel Michael's a nice person. It's not even a person. It's a matrix of consciousness that's run by the Anunnaki groups. It's affiliated with the Galactic Federation, and it's affiliated with the Alpha Omega Order Melchizedeks, which most people in the New Age movement don't know the difference between a Melchizedek cloister and an Alpha Omega Order Melchizedek. The Alpha Omega Order Melchizedeks are the Anunnaki groups of Melchizedeks who have been using, at times, when they needed something, they would work with the founders' races and be nice and pretend they were going to help everybody with the Christos mission. They were given trusts with sacred knowledge, certain portions of it, so they could help. And whenever it suited them, as far as their quest is to take over the halls of Amente stargates, because they want to hijack this time matrix at D11, literally the whole stargate system, and they can do it from Earth through the halls of Amente. These are some of the ancient issues that are coming up right now in our present hologram that were part of our ancient past. It's almost like the present is an ever-expanding and contracting at the same time onion skin, where we're one layer of the skin, that we're perceiving the skin of the hologram. And beneath that there's another, and beneath that there's another, and beneath that there's another. And it also goes out this way. If you're going this side of the skin, it's like a sphere. Then it's on the other side of the skin. There's more skin on this side, and there's more skin on this side. But somewhere in all of it, there's the seed. And the seed is the core time matrix structure, and the point where, before we all entered the hologram and got into the mess of polarization that's been taking place. Now, we're going to get into working with, when we come back from the, what time was the thing, so I don't go over and overshoot? 4 o'clock? What time is it? I can't see that. Oh, good, so I still have time. We'll get into technique. And we will be doing the tribal shield tone activations to begin the process of gaining control over our Merkaba fields when we get back from the break. But in the meantime, I want to explain a little bit more about structure. The structure that Partakai units take and manifestation templates take. We don't need that one. All right, this one is important. This chart gives you a basic understanding of the frequency relationships between our reality system, our hologram, the place I keep referring to as inner Earth, and parallel Earth, and also to Earth, Terra, and Gaia, and the dimensional structure. On this side over here, it's the Particum particle universe, which we have recently learned Particum produce myons, right? So consciousness that's stationed in here is myon consciousness, and it actually projects out its thought forms in its opposite. It projects out dions, and it sees the dions. It sees the other side as the positive space, as its space, as opposed to the negative space, the space between objects. Now over here we have the Partakai anti-particle universe, which is the universe that's the dion universe, the base electrical, that's the base magnetic. Base magnetic means its primary angles of spin are counterclockwise, which means it's spinning frequency up and out. That's the ascension side. This is the manifestation side, primarily. Now, they each interweave, where I told you before that diagram that was a nightmare to do that I haven't done yet, where you see actually each dimension flips from one to the next, including the ones in here. But you get a primary base as far as, is it primarily counterclockwise, which would be contracting. It would be contracting itself. First, it expands in order to contract. It expands back up to D12, and then contracts so it can get back out. It's your way out of the time matrix if you want to get yourself out of manifestation, or if you want to go from Earth to Terra, or Terra to Gaia, or density 1 to density 2 to density 3. Over here is the primary transmission universal system, which is made of the primarily dyons. This is where antiparticle double lives. It's where your consciousness is stationed, that experiences the hologram of manifestation. But it's the you that takes the other set of thought patterns that you don't. With every thought pattern, it implies there's a positive one that is a higher frequency, a negative one that is a lower frequency, and there may be benign thought patterns. It doesn't mean the lower one is a bad thought pattern. It just means it's a lower frequency and it has a higher expression, which would be the higher frequency, which would be this one. Then there's the middle zone one. So you have 3 thought patterns going on all at once and 3 selves that are experiencing them all. One station of consciousness is in a body here, one is here, and one is here. Here is the particle, antiparticle universe. This is the blending of these two. And these systems, when you look up in the sky, you will see 2 suns. You will see what appears as the sun from here and the sun from here as the 2 suns of the inner Earth system planets. You'll also see much more light as opposed to darkness. These are the time bands that when we go through the star activation cycle and into what I talked about before as the bridge zone project, these will be the time bands that this one is going to be blended in with. Because if it wasn't, it was going to have a collision with this one in where these spins were reversed and they were not the way they were supposed to be. So they would repel each other, which would have thrown the particle base of this system into alignment with the fallen time matrix that's off the grids. So it would have pulled the whole Earth, Tara, and Gaia literally into that time matrix, which would have created a real intergalactic mess for a lot of species in ours. We're going to be linking with this time matrix. And this one is going to be linking with another one that cuts through at a different angle, which would be the anti to this one. And this is an expanded one. It's these two put together to make a whole, which implies there's another opposite to that whole. That's, if you know, this would be bigger. This would be this one and this one put together equals this amount. Then you would have this one has an equal amount somewhere else, different time matrix. It's a neighboring time matrix, not just a parallel, but a neighboring one that has its own parallel. It's going to get its link. The inner Earth will link to that other time matrix. It will give it enough thrust to hold this section of our time matrix intact, because this part right here is going into shift at this point. Parallel Earth, as I had mentioned before, is going into full roll. It's going into cataclysmic pole shift because their intervention didn't get there in time over there. Actually, the intervention was offered, but our antiparticle doubles of a lot of us there didn't want to be bothered. And they allowed more and more of the Anunnaki to invade through the New Age movement until there were so many people that used to be humans in human bodies that got bounced out of their bodies and they took over, that they started to run the Templar in reverse when the stargates opened. Because they want control of the halls of Mente stargates. The only way they can get control of the halls of Mente stargates are by getting control of inner Earth. So what they're trying to do is go from our system and the parallel system, when the portals open, go in, invade, and run the Templar on a reverse matrix through the crystal pylon temples, which will send that reversal all the way up through the densities. And they will literally hijack a time matrix on a reverse. They will sever it from the grid. That's their intention. They have some real problems. The thought of wanting to do something like that just shows the state of illness of their consciousness. The consciousness of the fallen angelics isn't an evil consciousness. It's a part of Source. It's created of the units of consciousness of God, just like us. But you could look at it in this way, where in order to experience itself, God chose to look at itself, and it also chose to do the opposite, which was turn away from itself, to know itself in knowing itself in objectivity, and to knowing itself as if it didn't know itself at all. This is the stance toward Source that the fallen angelic races have taken. And they have a different evolutionary path that they will experience because of that. Eventually, if they don't make the other choice, where they choose to turn and meet Source head on and say, I am one with Source, yes, I am, we are one, and start acting in a way of love rather than separation, they will find themselves in a time matrix that falls off the grid and eventually goes back to Source, because it all goes back to Source. You can't escape from Source. It is the Source, and it's the only place everything takes place in. But they will go back as particle dust, as little vibrational units that don't hold a memory matrix with them. Yes?
knowing that they will end up, do they know that they'll end up?
This is the thing. It's the motivation, or the question. The question was basically, what is the motivation for them to continue, especially for so long? When you see some of the history here, it's been going on for like 250 billion years. This battle's been going on. Why? What is their motivation? What are they trying to accomplish? Why would they want to do something like this? And the answer to why is because they don't know any better. They're extremely intelligent. They know mechanics. They know the way things work. But there's something called code convolution. This is where you have a random element or a probability factor or a chance of fact, the opportunity for chance to take place within the creation of Source, even though you have divine order and divine chaos perfectly balanced. There is a factor in between the two of them that by combining energy in certain ways, there's always the element of surprise, like a scientist in a laboratory. Well, let's see, I'll mix this together and I'll mix that together and see what happens. And lots of times you come out with really neat stuff, and other times you blow up the laboratory and go, didn't mean to do that. Source is capable of knowing itself in those ways too. And that is what happened with the Anunnaki and the Draconian races. Basically, the founders' races are the races that seeded this time matrix. They started out first as Source. Source came into the primal sound fields as a collective of sound, of identity expressed as sound. They're called the Yanis, ascended masters level of consciousness. They're the real ascended masters, not little fake guys that say, I'm from D5, I ascended, because that doesn't count. You just went up a little. You have the Yanis consciousness collectives. You have consciousness collectives that came into the primal light fields. They're called your rishi levels of consciousness. When you get down into the beginnings of moving into matter, into the pre-matter system, D12, 11, and 10, density 4. That's where we have something called the Christos founders races. That's where the primal consciousness of the rishi, which is identity expressed as light, all right, doesn't have form, shape, three-dimensionality yet. It just is light. Where that comes down into the beginnings of form, into the pre-matter template, and into the hydroplasmic form, which is pale silver liquid light. It's like, I don't know if you ever saw the Terminator movies that had that guy that was made out of silver who he could turn into a puddle and then, build himself back up again and shapeshift and that kind of stuff. Well, it's kind of like that. And it looks like that, but it doesn't feel heavy like that. Looks like it feels kind of heavy to carry that kind of frequency around. These are the Christos founders races. And they had a primary template. It was a little bit different. You had 3 basic sets of Christos founders races that came out of the 3 primary identities that formed the 3 primary light fields. All right, in density 5, when the identity was still as light, you had 3 primary light fields: the blue flame, the ecstatic level, the violet flame, the triadic level, and the one in between, the gold flame. That was the polaric level. There's a level of identity, or a family of consciousness, that is each of those levels. You have those levels of consciousness connected to their corresponding larger gestalts of consciousness in the primal sound fields. In the primal sound fields, those identity levels, those 3 identity levels that each represent like a cosmic family of consciousness, are called the Ramyanas, that go with the violet sound field. There's the Vachiyanas, that go with the gold sound field. And there's the Grandyanas, that go with the ecstatic blue sound field, or the one that turns blue into light once it turns on into light. Now you have your Yanas families. You have in density 5, in pure light form, or gaseous light form, which looks like flaming suns. They're spheres of flaming light, gaseous light. What do we see when we look at our sun up there? A sphere of flaming gaseous light. But they're lots bigger up there, because this is only looking from density 1 to density 2. This is all the way up to density 5. These are the sons of God, the sons of light. The original meaning of that was not, they're all boys. It was, they are sons, radiating presences, beings of energy. Right? Well, each one of those 3, they're called the Brennau Rishi, the 3 Brennau Rishi families. You have the emerald order, Brennau, which correspond to the blue flame field, and the Akkadic level of consciousness, the first individuation from source. You have the gold order, and you have the violet order. Each of these three families of consciousness of light created founders' races. The Emerald Order created what were called the Elohai, Elohim, and their first form that was taken was a hominid feline. So actually, humans are closest related to the hominid feline because the Emerald Order were the ones who created the original imprint for humans and have supervised the evolution of consciousness. In other words, human souls are fragments of the founders, the Elohai, Emerald Order founders, who have come into incarnation. Now, the human form was interesting because it was created as a cooperative venture between the Emerald Order, Elohai, Elohim, the Gold Order, Seraphi, Seraphim. Now, these were the old angel names that used to be in the Bible and in a few different reference books from ancient of times. The Seraphi, Seraphim created different primary forms. They created reptilian forms, insectoid forms, and avian forms. And they were good. They weren't negative draconians or anything. They were founders' races. And then you had the Brahmarama, Christos founders' races, that were of the violet Brenna Rishi, the violet order. They created primarily cetacean forms. Now, they were the beginnings of creating races in manifest form in this time matrix. And how you create a race is you create a thought form. I mean, you assemble this template, and it's going to be like this. And you create the template very well. The last life wave that these guys were seeded in here, or seeded this time matrix with, was 950 billion years ago. And it went really, really well until in time terms. Now, time is a point in vibration. So from this point in vibration, if you translated it into movement of time, these are where these time figures come from. All right, the point in this time matrix that would translate to 250 billion years ago, there was certain things that had happened. As the Christos founders race, it has made more smaller different types of races by combining the races that they had. Here on Earth, if families are a little too close and there's a lot of inbreeding that happens within the genetic lines, distortions start to show up in the genetic template that begin to show evidence of the template not performing as it was originally intended, where characteristics that were desirable start to back off and you start to get mutations that weren't intended. This can happen in chemical DNA down here because it's happening in the template. That's what causes it. And if it can happen down here, as above, so below, and vice versa. What happened that created the whole mess in this time matrix was one of the families of the Elohai Elohim had created a group of beings with the Brahmarama races, which are the violet ray races. And this group was an hominid ape form. The hominid ape forms were also a form of Elohim. They're originally part of the Christos founders races. Certain families of the Emerald Order and the Violet Order had combined to create this form. There were 3 planets that existed in density 4 in what was called the Cradle of Lyra. And the beings that became what are now the Anunnaki, that used to be part of the Elohai family primarily, began to suffer from distortions of consciousness that were caused by distortions in their template because they had mixed and mixed and mixed their own stock for so long that it started to create strange electromagnetic effects in the template. When you get distortions in template, you will get distortions in consciousness, perception, cognition, feeling, and understanding, even on that level. Because of the distortions that they had, there was a similar problem happening on a very nearby planet. The planets that I'm talking about were the density 4 equivalents of what was called Vega in Lyra. That was the D10 planet where the Seraphi Seraphim had seeded reptilian and draconian and insectoid type races. Then you had the D11 level of the Lyra system, the Cradle of Lyra, which was a planet called Avion. And then you had the D12 level of the Lyra system, all of which were connected to Earth, Terra, and Gaia, coming down in the densities. The D12 level is where the Gate 12, Stargate 12, was located. This planet was called Aramatena. which was the sound tone translation of its vibrational energy signature. Aramatana holds the divine blueprint. It's the D12 divine blueprint of all of the galactic systems below. So it's the pattern we're trying to reset, that's progressively being reset in this time matrix to heal it. The Elohai Elohim were from that planet because they were appointed as being the Akkadic representatives, the ascendant masters that had come in as the blue flame light fields and then had come into manifestation as the Elohai Elohim founders races. They were the guardians of Gate 12 because that was the most precious gate that has to be guarded in this time matrix, because if it gets destroyed, the time matrix gets severed and the life field gets hijacked. And if something can do that, it can literally take over the life field and exist for quite a long time without having to cooperate with anything else, including Source, by feeding off the consciousness that's in there, which violates the free will of the life field that's being hijacked in that way. The original conflict started with the Elohai Elohim that had become distorted, that were the ones that had gone into hominid ape form by combining with the cetacean races. And it was a hominid aquatic ape. They could breathe air and water. They could lower in the densities and come down and be on land or be in air. Be on land or in water. These groups became very upset with another group from the fallen, the Seraphim, the Seraphim races. There was a group of reptilians and a group of draconian forms from Vega that were becoming just as twisted in consciousness as the Elohim were becoming from the D11 planet Avion. So these guys were starting to war with each other, where they started to go into advanced polarity problems, polarity dramas. That was not part of the original intention of this time matrix. This time matrix had been seated under something called the Emerald Covenant. There was a co-evolution treaty, an agreement treaty, that there were certain intentions that this time matrix was created to experience. They were joyful. There would be, because you need polarity, there would be enough of the negative to make the whole experience possible. But it was a free will matrix. It was supposed to be built on love, joy, freedom, and the ability. It was an ascension time matrix to be able to have its life forms come in and ascend, and other life forms from other time matrices could come here to get out of their problems in their time matrices and heal and move up through the system. The Emerald Covenant was entered by, in fact, it was the reason why the founders races were appointed as the founders races. They, as Giannis Ascendant Masters Consciousness, chose to come in to do this because it was Source intention to assist some of the other time matrices that have fallen. So it goes way back, this last wave of our conflict that we're in. It's not that the beings that became, who are choosing to be our adversaries right now in space-time, it's not that they're evil or they're bad, but they have twisted thinking. They have twisted thinking because they have twisted fire letters in their manifestation templates. The Keelan codes that are made of the Partakai units are shaped wrong because the Partakai units are going in the wrong balances. They were split wrong, where we have the natural split between Partakai, and Partakam. We have the 45 and the other 45 that splits into 11 and 2/3 and 33 and 1/3. They have a different split, which means their orientation to polarity is not in harmony with this time matrix. So this is where the conflict came from. And this is another point in the matrix where it is coming to a head and where it can be solved. When we work with Merkaba mechanics, when we work with becoming aware of the creation physics that we're a part of, we are entering the process of reclaiming our memory of what humans were created for and what, as a human, once upon a time when we remembered who we are, what we chose to come here for. We were a team. We were a team of ascended masters that chose to come in as the founders races, that chose to create together. The human DNA template is primarily Elohai Elohim, Emerald Order, but it also has elements of the Violet Order and the Gold Order in it. So it carries the template for ascension up into the primal light fields, into the sound fields, for all of the other life forms in this time matrix, which means other life forms, if they choose to enter the Emerald Covenant, can be assisted in gaining incarnation into a human form where they can progressively gain back the 12-strand or higher imprint, which will allow them the ability to reclaim their ability to have ascension and to become Christed beings and regain their free will. And they're at one minute with Source. So it's a big picture we're in the middle of. Let's see. Okay, we can keep going. Oh, you're back to this. Yes, thank you. I haven't seen that in a while. This I will try to go through quickly. This is a Kathara grid. For people who have not taken any of the other workshops, for those who have, you're probably very sick of looking at it by now, I wouldn't doubt, because we go through this all the time. This structure is very important because it shows the basic interrelationship. It's a map. It's a basic interrelationship of the primal structure that all manifestation templates are based on. It's the primal structure by which Source created the holographic projection field that we could then enter to experience the hologram. It is the relationship of, this one shows the relationship of the first dimensions, 1 through 12. It shows their relationship in frequency and how they make these interesting patterns of energy. It makes 3 pillars of frequency, which of course correspond to the different primal light fields. They will be the paths of frequency that the density 5 primal light fields from D13, 14, and 15 would come down once they're activated. Now, your body has a template like that, and there are points on and in your body that directly correspond to it. Planetary body is the same way. On the planet, these points are the Stargate points. There are 12 primary Stargates in the planetary Templar. Each one of them corresponds to one dimensional frequency band, and that is the one that will run that dimensional frequency, or that flashline sequence, that flashing on and off sequence of particle, particum, particum through the planetary grids. This is the slowest flashline sequence, dimension 1, and up there is the highest, dimension 12. That's the pre-matter template. Now, these Stargates, these are Stargates, but they're also a Cathara grid. Every form that is manifest, first when it puts its consciousness into this time matrix, into the primal sound field, starts to pick up this pattern. All right, there are actually 2 of these linked together. At D13, you would have another number 1 that would climb up, going from D13 up through the sound fields and back into Source. So there's actually a set of 2 of those, which would be 24 points, which actually creates sets of 24 time matrices, sets of them. So our time matrix in its parallel, you have 24 of those, and then you'd have a replica of that, and it's a very, very large creation platform. But this is very important. We want to understand what it is we're protecting, first of all. If we're supposed to be the planetary guardians, and that means we guard in Stargates, what are these things? Where are these things, right? Well, we have Stargates in our DNA and in our bodies that are the places where our matter transmutes when we interact with one of the planetary Stargates. So a Stargate in your body, or the centers in your body that will allow the shift of angular rotation of particle spin to take place, are the internal parts of your template that correspond to your Maharic shield, or your D12 pre-matter template. Now you also have, as part of your pre-matter template, something called your tribal shield, which is your connection to the race template, and the tribal shield is connected to the planetary shield. It's from the planetary shield level connection that you have in your own DNA template that you will be able to, if you activate those frequencies, be able to see a Stargate once those areas become open on the planet. And a person who doesn't have, if you want to see Stargate 4, you must have strand 5 activation. Remember, you'll see as solid, or see in the hologram, what is one dimensional frequency band below your station of awareness, and your station of awareness is where your DNA template is activated to. Now, when we do Cathara healing, that program, the reason it was really given was the fastest way to begin the process of getting your DNA activated, because you also find that each DNA strand level corresponds to a chakra level, and we have 15 primary chakras. We learned that we can activate the 12th chakra, which will trigger activation of the 12th strand, and there are several types of Kundalini activations that you can very gently give to yourself through the D12 frequency, which is the pre-matter template, the Christos frequency. That means you're not going to hurt yourself, because the Christos template holds the divine right distribution of energy. So you can't bring something in that's going to mess up your systems. So when you do it through the D12 frequency, which is a place that actually opens below your feet, the 12th chakra is below your feet about 6 inches, and the place where you activate your Maharic shield, or the portion of your DNA template that holds the entire strand template, is about 12 inches below the feet. That's what I believe they started this class with yesterday. Phil was reading it, and Marianne, I think. That is the beginning of the process of working with the frequencies. So when we're dealing with Stargates, it's important to realize they're inside And they're outside too. And to see the outside ones, you've got to open the inside ones. Okay, yes? Okay. Ka, va, ra is a sound vibration translation. It means, ka means light, va means sound, and ra refers to one. Light sound union is what the translation is. And the language is ancient Anahazi, which was the name of the Elohai Elohim founders, Christos founders race, the Emerald Order founders race. And that was the first spoken, externalized language. They spoke the language of the Akkadic sound field, which was the first individuation of source. So it is the most complex and at the same time the most simple sound tones translated. So that's where that name comes from, and a lot of others too. Most of the new words you might encounter in this material, especially ones that have interesting sounds to them, like Virage, Gundare, these are all translations from the original language, which was the Akkadic language, the first sound projection. So you could really call it the language of source, or the language of God. And from there, all other languages emerged. Okay? Let's see. Now, we will move on. It gets more fun. What are we doing? Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, I'll do maps and keys in a minute, honey. Then we'll do this one. Just want to show you really quick what a stargate basically functions like. It's a set of vortices. This is the planet. It's a set of vortices that exist in the planetary core. It's really 3 axes that cross over at different angle relations to each other. The angle relations are actually, you have a vertical and you have a 45 degree and another 45 degree cutting through, and they all spin. Now, these vortices line up with vortices that would be in inner Earth and in parallel Earth, and then vertically they line up with with Terra and Gaia. The halls of Amente stargates are connected to inner Earth, but they emerge through Earth's natural stargates. There's actually 12 of these, not just 6, but it would have been too crowded on the diagram. So this just gives you an idea of these sets of vortices. Now vortices are like cones of energy, like that make little bow ties because their little small point is locked together. The little bow tie is called a crystal seal. It's a place where frequencies interface in a way that creates a magnetic lock. A crystal seal holds the vortices apart, and one side of the vortice will be magnetic and the other side will be electrical. That means one will be made out of myons, one will be made out of dions, and they are the circulatory system. They're the planetary chakra system by which energy between here and the particle universe and the antiparticle universe continually circulates. The primal life force currents move through planetary systems, galactic systems, universal systems, through these systems of vortices. Now, what's interesting about the vortices, when you release the polarization on the seal that keeps them separated into a bow tie, they naturally come together. And when you take 2 vortices together like this, they form what's called a Merkaba field. They form a set of counter-rotating spirals of energy, interwoven counter-rotating spirals of energy, that at the center creates a sphere of energy that's called a form constant. The form constant can be compared to looking at the Vesica Pisces symbols of the 2 circles interfacing with each other, where one is the dimension above or the density above, one is the one below, and then one is that inner Earth timeline, inner Earth Terra Gaia, is the timeline that links the 2. You have density 1 time field, density 2 time field, and then you have that inner time field running here where it links the parallels, and it makes a vertical link, and it makes a horizontal link between parallels through the inner system, and a vertical link through each of them by skipping from one to the other. So these sets, in the normal, when we're not in a stellar activation cycle, the planet simply it's holding at its core a certain amount of frequency that it picked up from the last stellar activation cycle. Has X amount of frequency, and so does the parallel planet, and so does the inner Earth planet. And there's a gentle flow of frequency of myons, dions, and trions. They actually move through these vortices and turn into each other. What's a myon here will become a dion there, and vice versa. And they collide with each other and become trions in the meantime in the inner Earth time field. This is how the reality field is projected. One will turn on. Let's say parallel Earth flashes on and becomes real, right? It flashes off, then inner Earth flashes on. It flashes off, and then our Earth hologram flashes on.
And there's a cycle to them. Yeah, it's the Trinity. That's the divine Trinity concept, as it's expressing in the hologram, which started with the partike, partikai, and particum. Okay, so this just basically shows you the structure of stargates. Now, stargates, there's a difference between a stargate and a time portal. All right, portals are basically, that word is used to refer to the ones that go horizontal or diagonal. The ones that go on straight verticals are considered main stargates. Now, portals, you could go through to inner Earth or to parallel Earth, or you could take a diagonal one and you could go through and you could access a stargate point from certain crossover points and get on a vertical to go up to the next. It's like the long way home, zigzagging up through the angles that go like this, that make crosses. The fastest way to ascend and to make thoughts manifest and to basically gain your mastery back is to work with the stargates, the ones both inside of you in your DNA and the ones on the planet. Now, they form Merkaba fields inside. This is what's happening. When I talk about you have Merkaba fields inside your body that need to activate, that'll activate your DNA. They're little bow ties, black and white hole sets. Where there is a transmitting particle, there will be its counterpart, receiving particle. All right. When there's a level of polarization between them, where they have the same charge there that actually keeps them repelling each other so they don't make the link. When the polarity in here reverses on one part of it, it allows them to come together to create that window, that form constant. That's what opens up to another time field. That's where in your DNA template, when you have the coding, the scalar templates that are working like this, turn into one of those, that's where you start to get the awareness of yourself in that incarnation, in that other space-time location coming through. You're literally starting to blend your thought field with its thought field because they're no longer separated by the vibrations that were holding them apart through the template. But on the planetary level, there are major stargates. There are 12 primary stargates, and then there are 12 stargates in inner Earth that are directly connected to our stargates through something called Q sites. Q sites are activation sites for Earth's stargates. So there's 24 locations on the surface of the planet that have to do with running the Templar. This is what we are being trained to start to become aware of. Because if things go well in our hologram, when the time comes that the Maharaji of Sirius B and some of the other guardian races let themselves be known, and we get to meet the inner Earth people, which a time will come for that, the keys to the Templar were given to us by Source originally. They were taken from us, and we kind of let them be taken from ourselves by making some decisions that weren't the best that we could have made. We're having the keys to the Templar returned. So we need to know, first of all, what is a Templar? That's the energy circulatory system of the planet, the galaxy, and the universe, and your body, and everything else that's manifest. And it operates through sets of black and white holes that form portals and stargates that cross over between time zones and space zones, which are zones in a hologram, which are vibrational fields of energy, vibration and oscillation. The black holes are associated with the drawing particles, the base magnetics, which are the myons, and the transmitting particles are the dions. These are the fields that create your internal Merkaba fields and also the fields that are called the Merkaba fields around the body. And the larger ones, if you charge them with D12 frequency by opening your 12th chakra below your feet, which is what we're going to do this evening on the beach when we have time to really get into it, you can use the outer Merkaba, get it activated with the D12 frequency subharmonics, and then use it to temporarily manually reset the proper spin ratios, which means you're going to get your Merkaba spinning in the right spin ratios to get that particle-antiparticle balance back, even though the planetary grids don't have it yet. Which means it'll last temporarily, and eventually the planetary grids will override your thought form and put you back in reversal. But it's the beginning process, learning to use your own stargates, which is your Merkaba field, to get control of your body. So you and your body and your what's in between, which is your emotional self, it's kind of sandwiched in between your mental body and your physical body, where you can all have a reacquaintance party and start to get to know each other a little better, where you start to feel more connected to yourself here, and also it will begin the process of bringing in your higher levels of consciousness. Okay, let's see. You want to do that one, honey? Please. Thank you. Is it break time in 7 minutes? I got 5 minutes. Yeah. All right, 5 or 7 minutes I can get all the way through Stargates before we go to break. Then we can pick up something else. But okay. Now, this diagram shows, now these diagrams are all in the Templar manual. So those of you who've gotten that, you do have these diagrams. This shows a bit of what I showed you before with the particum universe, which is the one our consciousness is stationed in right now, or the majority of our consciousness is stationed in. You have the inner Earth line. These represent timelines, okay? Progressions of cycles of time. A cycle of time is a cycle of vibration and oscillation the consciousness adopts within itself that gives it a format for sequencing energy projection, so its hologram of moments can project out from one to the next, to the next, to the next, okay? So these are timelines and time cycles, but in truth they are vibrational oscillation patterns that you hold within your consciousness that keep you rooted in the hologram. So to move from one time space-time to another means not only shifting the angular rotation of particle spin, it means you're going to change the time rhythms that your consciousness and your body is functioning on. It means you're going to change the flash lines that we talked about. If you're in density 1, that means you're following a set of 3 flash line programs that interface with each other that go to the rhythm of the density 1 system. If you want to go to density 2, you need to raise that frequency up to the density 2 rhythms. What will change your flashline sequences is changing the speed of your Merkaba. And when you use the original Christos Merkaba pattern, which is the 33 1/3 and 11 2/3 breakdown between magnetic and electrical, it will naturally reset them and get the right speeds going on every level of the Merkaba. So this diagram shows you the 3 systems again, the parallel, our system, and the inner Earth. And this is the Cathara grid run at a bit of an angle. This shows you the connections. Remember the Cathara grid showed the 12 primary stargates that go from D1 up into D12 pre-matter? That's the first step of getting out of density or getting mastery over the coming in and going out process. This shows you how they link, how the 12 primary stargates link through the bodies of density 1 Earth, density 2 Tara, density 3 Gaia, and then they would link to the Christos template, which is density 4 Aramatena, through SG, Stargate 10, 11, and 12. Here's the same set of them working in inner Earth, but inner Earth is this and this combined. So it not only has this template of the 12 stargates that are running in the parallel, they actually run in the reverse rotation to the ones in ours, because stargates rotate. It has both, so it has twice as many stargates, just like it has 2 suns. So when I talk about the halls of Amente, stargates, I'm talking about this system, which has been enhanced with a series of 12 crystal pylon temples that are, some of them are here, there are 12 of them on density 1 inner Earth. There are a set of 12 for each of the planetary level stargates on density 2 Tara. For each one of these, which represent the universal stargates, there are 12 universal ones. Then there on every planet, there are 12 points, 12 planetary ones, where those 12 universal ones plug in. So there is a set of crystal pylon temples. Now, on the front of the manual, this manual, we have Leela to thank for these pictures. Leela, a friend of ours here, got sent on a journey. Do you see these crystal pictures here with the little person? The little person there is Leela. She got to go to see these. When I talk about crystal pylon temples, these are massive selenite quartz crystal structures that run the photoradionic energies of the stargates through the planetary rock bed and through the planetary template. They keep the inner Earth stargates opened at all times, so the inner Earth does not have to wait for a stellar activation cycle in order to benefit from the frequencies that come through from the stargates. It's all right to leave your stargates open if they're being properly maintained and kept in balance. What they will do is provide a massive free energy system for the planet that has awesome power, that doesn't create any nuclear waste, that doesn't create any... It's a power that's in harmony with Source, because it's built upon the proper use of Source energy and the natural use of Source elements. So when I talk about the halls of Amente, I'm talking about the gates and the temples, these beautiful crystals They look like those massive, these are tiny ones compared to the size of them. They're like the size, bigger than the Empire State Building type crystals. These are crystals you could live in, all right? Like, the only thing I've ever seen that comes close to them is in quite a while ago they had that first Superman movie out. I remember a scene where he was a baby and there was these massive crystal caves. They're absolutely gorgeous. I got so homesick when I said, oh, I know I've been there. You know, those places exist. They're some of the things we will get to see eventually. If we can make the shift of consciousness and the shift of particle spin into the chemical matter base, where our chemical matter base would be in the inner earth timeline. I have been to inner earth because I've had help. When I was in my childhood, I had help of making that particle spin shift. With the DNA activation, I had help because I was taken there for training. That's where I got my Melchizedek cloister ordinations. By the way, I'm not of the Alpha Omega order. I'm not an Anunnaki. And we're from the Holy Order of the Unisai, is what the Melchizedek cloister people are. It's the Elohai Elohim Emerald Order. Anyway, inner earth exists, and it is one of the most beautiful reality fields that I remember experiencing since I've been in the densities. There's a lot of places I don't remember in this body. I can't hold all the memory in this body. But everything is more, well, first of all, it's bigger than it is here. Our bodies are larger. There's more space between our atoms. And everything is larger. The trees, the plants, the fruit. You have fruit like apples and lemons. You begin to get the Alice in Wonderland feeling. You know, did I shrink? You know, no, you grew. You know? So these are real places.